Chapter 25-27. How can you compare to Senior Brother Shao? Senior Brother Shao defeated tens of thousands of sword cultivators with Senior Brother Li. Of course, he's going out for us. I'm not worried. The Changbai sect disciple replied without hesitation. That's right. Any disciple who wants to leave must first make a blood oath. The group of disciples came to their senses and said, "Oh. Okay." The Cool Breeze Valley disciple was quick to make a blood oath and hurriedly left. Then, another dozen disciples left. There were disciples from the Cool Breeze Valley and the Utmost Happiness faction. However, none of the Changbai sect disciples left. Not to mention the other disciples' motives for leaving, Xiaohua didn't activate his magic power when he came out of the cave. Instead, he used the ethereal steps. Although his speed wasn't as fast as the flying technique, it was still much faster than an ordinary person. He floated out of the cave like a wisp of smoke. After waiting for a few breaths, Xiaohua slightly checked his true essence. There was also some consumption, but it was much less than when he used the flying technique. It seems that the blue thing in the spiritual chi of heaven and earth isn't as simple as I thought. If it accumulates in my body for a long time, even a slight movement will devour my true essence, right? Xiaohua thought. His body slowed down again. As he walked slowly, he released his divine sense. Fortunately, there was nothing wrong with his divine sense. It could even go a little farther. At this time, the cave was dead silent. Only the sound of Xiaohua's footsteps could be heard. There was no one else in sight. Presumably, the other cultivators had the same idea as Xiaohua and the others. Here it is. Xiaohua looked left and right. His body flew up and rushed toward the stone wall. When the stone wall was near, he used the earth escape technique and entered the stone wall. Oh, this stone wall is also strange. As soon as Xiaohua entered the stone wall, he immediately felt a great resistance. It was not as easy as before when he used the earth escape technique. After a few dozen feet, he felt like he was wading through a quagmire. Even the true essence in his body was greatly consumed. He didn't dare to go any further and hurriedly retreated from the stone wall. Landing in the cave, Xiaohua's expression was extremely ugly. Looking at the stone wall above his head, he lightly bit his lips. The last hope in his heart had also dissipated. Looks like if I can't find a thin enough stone wall, this young master's Fa Li won't be enough. If this vicious scheme wasn't done by Qin Jian, I wouldn't believe it even if you beat me to death. Qin Jian's face appeared in Xiaohua's mind. He really wanted to stab Qin Jian's face a few times. This guy mainly schemed against those few golden core cultivators, but he didn't expect to trap me as well. Xiaohua sighed. Although his magic power was profound and was comparable to late-stage golden core, he was also helpless when encountering this thing that consumed true essence. Let's find where the stone walls are thin first. Xiaohua thought as he opened his left hand and looked at the four walls of the karst cave. However, he only knew the name of the Dharma Eye. He didn't know the origin of the Dharma Eye at all, and there was no need to talk about any cultivation. Everything depended on the instincts of the Dharma Eye. Normally, when looking for the flaws of the Dharma Eye was right in front of him, and he could look at it. However, at this time, he had to look further and deeper. All of a sudden, Xiaohua was stumped. He didn't know how to look deeper, how to find where the stone walls were the shallowest. Even if I can't find it, then I still have to find it. Xiaohua knew that this was the only way for him, Li Zongbao, Xiao Mao, and the others to survive. He could only grit his teeth and slowly explore. The stone walls were filled with azure. It was no different from the other places in the karst cave. However, as Xiaohua wandered aimlessly, he gradually discovered a difference. The azure within the karst cave was just like that. It was like a clear sky, and it felt as if it stretched as far as the eye could see. However, the stone walls seemed to be mottled, and the brightness of the azure was somewhat different. It was as if some of the clouds in the sky were blocking the azure color. The inside of the stone walls are all rock layers, and there is also water-type spiritual energy of heaven and earth. If the stone walls are thicker, there will be more spiritual energy contained, and this azure color will be bright. Xiao Hua inwardly pondered. If the stone walls are thinner, there will be less spiritual energy contained, and the azure color will naturally be dim. I only need to find where the color is the dimmest, and also the place that can be broken through the most. Then, I can use the overturning sea seal to break through this layer. Wouldn't I be able to escape? This place is definitely beyond the expectations of a sword cultivator, right? As it turned out, Xiao Hua wanted to use the overturning sea seal to break through the layer and create a passage. However, Xiao Hua didn't know how thick this rock layer was, and how much spiritual energy he would need to use to break through it. Therefore, he could only try his best to find where the azure color was the dimmest. Every time he found a place that looked similar, Xiao Hua would use his Buddhist awareness to make a mark, and then continue to walk down. It was the same as when he left the karst cave, he also used his Buddhist awareness to make a mark. He didn't have the confidence that he could successfully find Li Zongbao and the others again. After searching for several hours, Xiao Hua felt that he had walked more than 10 li. He had also made over 100 marks. Unfortunately, these marks were all similar, and there wasn't a particularly obvious dimness. Sigh, Xiao Hua sighed slightly. Just as he was about to turn back, he heard movement in front of him. Cunning cultivator, where are you going? And the voice was getting closer and closer. Oh. Xiao Hua heard that a cultivator was being chased by a sword cultivator. How could he ignore it? He hurriedly walked a few steps, and just as he was about to go over to take a look, he saw a few sword lights in the distance flying towards him. Ah. Since when did Changbai sect cultivators understand sword cultivator flying swords? Seeing a Changbai sect disciple in Taoist robes desperately escaping on a flying sword with 3 sword cultivators chasing behind him, Xiao Hua couldn't help but be stunned. But just a moment later, Xiao Hua said self-deprecatingly, since this young master can practice the flying sword techniques of sword cultivators, the Changbai sect has disciples who practice flying swords, there is no reason not to practice the flying sword techniques of sword cultivators. Senior brother Xiao, save me. That Changbai sect disciple wasn't fated to die. When he saw Xiao Hua from afar, he was overjoyed and hurriedly shouted. Even if Xiao Hua didn't want to save him, he couldn't escape now. Fortunately, Xiao Hua's awe-inspiring aura from before was still present. When the 3 swordsmen saw that it was actually this fiend, their expressions changed and they immediately turned to flee, afraid that Xiao Hua would catch up to them. Heh heh. Xiao Hua's little tail also stood up when he saw how mighty he was. Little did he know that the sword cultivators who had escaped were all curling their lips as they whispered in unison, just let this guy be free for a while. After this round of killing, he will know the methods of us sword cultivators. The Changbai sect disciple landed and bowed respectfully with lingering fear. Junior brother Niu Ming from Changbai sect greets senior brother Xiao. Thank you senior brother for saving my life. Don't mention it. Xiao Hua waved his hand. I didn't even lift my hand. What life-saving grace is there? Hee, it's all because of senior brother's awe-inspiring reputation. You were much more powerful than anyone else when you raised your hand. Niu Ming flattered. Then he looked behind Xiao Hua and asked curiously, senior brother Li Zongbao and junior brother Xiao Mao, and they hid like the other disciples. Why didn't you hide? Xiao Hua didn't directly tell him where Li Zongbao and the others were hiding and asked him a question instead. Sigh, junior brother feels that just hiding isn't the best strategy. We should find a place to break through before the sword cultivators make their next move. Otherwise, we can only be slaughtered by the sword cultivators. Niu Ming didn't hide anything and said. Xiao Hua nodded slightly. Did you find anything? Sigh, if it was so easy to find, then the sword cultivators' preparations over the past few years would have been in vain. Niu Ming sighed. Junior brother only searched for 2 hours and saw that the number of sword cultivators in the cave gradually increased. They must have come out to kill us. Junior brother tried to hide, but I was still discovered by several sword cultivators. If it wasn't for senior brother Xiao, junior brother probably wouldn't have been able to escape. Xiao Hua didn't comment. He looked at Niu Ming and narrowed his eyes. Niu Ming didn't understand. He looked at himself in surprise and then looked around. When he saw the flying sword in his hand, his expression changed slightly. Hee, Xiaohua smiled and said, "Junior brother Niu, since you already found something wrong, do you still need me to say it?" Senior brother Xiao, Niu Ming hurriedly smiled apologetically. "I am indeed a disciple of the Changbai sect. I'm definitely not a sword cultivator. This flying sword. Sigh, since I've reached this level, I don't dare to hide it. However, when I was practicing the secret technique, I already swore a blood oath that I couldn't reveal a single word. I hope senior brother Xiao can understand. And, the disciples of the Changbai sect are good at flying swords. It's normal for them to practice the flying sword technique of sword cultivators." Xiaohua said with a smile, "But the restriction of the Sky Patrol City is specially designed to check the sword origin. How did you escape?" "Of course, there's a secret technique." Niu Ming smiled bitterly. "Obviously, this involved a blood oath. But I'm really curious. I also want to prove that you're not a sword cultivator." Xiaohua continued to ask. "Although there are jade slips in my storage bag, if senior brother Xiao forces me, I'd rather die together with you," Niu Ming said sternly. Whoosh! It was Xiaohua's Taoist robe swaying. Xiaohua stretched out his hand without hesitation and grabbed Niu Ming's throat like a flash of lightning. Ah! Niu Ming was shocked. Although he was prepared, he didn't expect Xiaohua to be so fast. The strangest thing was that there didn't seem to be any spiritual power fluctuations. However, he was only shocked when Xiaohua pressed his thumb on his neck. His vision turned black and he fainted. Huh! Xiaohua looked at Niu Ming, who had fallen to the ground, then reached out and took his storage pouch. He opened it and looked carefully. There weren't many jade slips inside, so he didn't look at them carefully. He copied them one by one and put them back into his storage pouch. Then, he put the storage bag in Niu Ming's arms. He took the jade slips and checked them one by one. Chapter 25-28. Oh, so that's how it is. Xiaohua was proficient in the art of flying swords. He only needed to read it once to understand. Some of the Changbai sect's disciples had been nurturing swords since they were young, but these disciples were specially selected. Their primordial spirits are strong enough to withstand the division. It seems that Reverend Bright's sword left some of his secret techniques in the Changbai sect. These disciples have both vital essence and sword essence in their bodies. They usually use vital essence to drive ordinary flying swords and use secret techniques to conceal sword essence. But now, they don't use vital essence and only use sword essence. Of course, they won't be affected by the strange spiritual energy of heaven and earth. However, the Changbai sect doesn't allow this secret technique to be publicized, so these disciples don't dare to use it easily. Moreover, with sword cultivation alone, these disciples who are in the foundation stage can only fall into the realm of nurturing swords. They are no match for sword cultivators, so... Xiaohua pinched his chin and pondered. "Senior brother Xiao, what happened to me? Why did I suddenly faint?" Niu Ming slowly woke up and asked in surprise. "You were being chased by sword cultivators just now. Maybe your qi and blood surged." Xiaohua collected his thoughts and said with a smile. "So that's how it is." Niu Ming nodded. "Thank you senior brother Xiao for looking after me. Well, do you want to go by yourself now? Or do you want to go by yourself?" Xiaohua asked. "What?" Xiaohua's question stunned Niu Ming. Then he came to his senses and said with a bitter smile, "Since I've already come out, there's no reason to turn back. I'd better find a way out myself." "Okay." Xiaohua nodded and pointed in a direction. "Senior brother Li Zongbao and the others are there. You can go there and find them. If there's a chance, you can go by yourself. If not, we'll be together and take care of each other." "Oh, right, there are hundreds of your sect's disciples there." Hearing this, Niu Ming's eyes lit up. He bowed again and said, "Thank you senior brother Xiao for your advice. I understand." I'll go now. Senior brother, you have to be careful too. Well, go. Xiaohua waved his hand and watched Miao Ming leave on his flying sword. Damn it, the Changbai sect is indeed powerful. Why didn't I think of this? They actually concealed sword essence. Xiaohua turned around and walked in Miao Ming's direction. As he walked, he took out a jade slip and carefully examined it. His dream executioner and mountain splitter had been successfully nurtured into swords, and he had been using dream executioner for a long time. However, he had never deliberately cultivated the flying sword arts of sword cultivators. He had always used his original spiritual sense to control the flying sword, which was no different from using a magic treasure. However, such a flying sword could only be a magic treasure and not a true flying sword, even if it had a sword spirit. Although he had recently begun to comprehend the sword arts of ordinary sword cultivators, he was still hesitant. Sword cultivation was different from the Buddhist sect. Sword essence could be easily seen by cultivators. Moreover, in the midst of a great sword Dao battle, he was already afraid that he would be discovered by others. How could he dare to cultivate sword essence? When he thought of sword origin, Xiaohua understood why his 7-star Great Formation was not as powerful as Ling Yunwu's 7-star Great Formation. Not only did he control it through his sword pouch, not only did his 7-star Great Formation consist of 7 flying swords transformed from illusory swords, but most importantly, it should be sword origin, right? And the reason why his flying sword could not produce sword intent was probably because of sword origin, right? But Reverend Bright Sword's jade slip did not mention that one must cultivate sword origin. Xiaohua was somewhat baffled. But how could Reverend Bright Sword's flying sword have sword intent? Unfortunately, Reverend Bright's sword had already fallen. Xiaohua was dead and could not testify. Forget it, let's wait and see. If it can really conceal sword origin, this young master will also give it a try. Xiaohua secretly made up his mind. Moreover, this Miao Ming's jade slip also has the sword arts of nurturing sword and drawing sword. If he can cultivate it, then this young master can naturally cultivate it too. Where is this? Xiaohua originally went back the way he came, but when his mind relaxed slightly, he immediately showed his instincts. He actually walked to a dead end, a place similar to the karst cave Xiaohua first found. Xiaohua only looked and was about to turn around, but at this moment, he casually raised his hand again. The brilliance here is very dim. After Xiaohua saw it with his Dharma eye, he could not help but be overjoyed. It's here. Xiaohua did not hesitate to use his Buddhist sense to make an imprint, hurriedly walked out, and then walked back. The way back was naturally not as easy as before. Xiaohua easily found several dead ends, and these dead ends without exception, the walls of the karst cave looked extremely thin. Damn it, did I make a mistake? Xiaohua did not know whether to laugh or cry. If that's the case, then the first karst cave this young master found was the thinnest place, right? Didn't this young master's efforts go in vain? Oh, that's not right. At that time, I already saw it in the karst cave. It was not like that. Xiaohua immediately shook his head again. But fortunately, Xiaohua had other Buddhist sense marks along the way. Although he spent a lot of effort, he finally found the way back. Not far from the karst cave where Li Zongbao and the others were hiding, Xiaohua found another karst cave. This karst cave was smaller than the previous one, but it looked darker than the others. Moreover, Xiaohua also gradually fumbled around. The smaller the karst cave on the dead end, the thinner the walls. Like the one he found before, the walls were naturally thick. After Xiaohua removed his Buddhist sense imprint and hammered the walls a few times, Li Zongbao noticed the movement and opened the restriction, letting Xiaohua in. Seeing Xiaohua come back safely, Li Zongbao was overjoyed. Without waiting for him to speak, Xiaohua's eyes swept the karst cave, and he could not help but be stunned. Before he left, there were only a few hundred people in this karst cave, not 1,000. But now? The inside of the karst cave was dark. At a glance, there were thousands of people, perhaps tens of thousands. Why, are there so many people? Xiao Hua felt inconceivable. After all, it was only a dozen or so hours. Most importantly, he only met that cultivator, Niu Ming, along the way. However, Xiao Hua immediately understood. It was not that there was no one in this karst cave, but everyone was looking for a way out. Only he could not find a way out. He was looking for a dead end, and on this dead end, he could only meet Niu Ming, who was also forced into a dead end. Damn it, is this young master so unlucky? Xiao Hua rubbed his nose, almost touching the phoenix talisman on his chest. Hee, it's like this. How could Li Zongbao know that Xiao Hua suddenly raised this matter to countless heights? He explained, after junior brother Xiao left, we discussed for a long time, but we did not have any ideas. We did not even have the slightest clue about this strange poison. We thought that we could not just sit and wait for death, and put all our hopes on junior brother. Therefore, we chose a few disciples with profound magic power from each sect and asked them to go out and find the disciples of other sects. So it's like this. Xiao Hua let out a sigh of relief and smiled, that's the best. Junior brother also felt that the weight on his shoulders was very heavy, and I was afraid that I could not bear it. I just don't know how the discussion went. Sigh, what the hell? Li Zongbao also cursed, there are nearly 10,000 cultivators in my Dao sect, but none of them have seen this poison before. They say that it is a strange poison that can devour one's vital energy. Also, a few disciples have some antidote pills on them, but they are all useless. Even, a disciple lost his life because of it. Fight poison with poison. This idea immediately appeared in Xiao Hua's mind. He was very glad that he did not use it forcefully before. While they were talking, there were some fluctuations of magic power at the entrance of the cave. Li Zongbao did not even think and wanted to activate the formation plate. Junior brother should do it. Xiao Hua stretched out his hand, in such a dangerous place. One more bit of true essence is one more bit of guarantee. With a flash of his hand, Xiao Hua took the formation plate that Li Zongbao did not want to return to him. He pointed his hand and a green light slowly flew towards the entrance of the cave. After the array flashed, it revealed close to 100 Changbai sect disciples at the entrance of the cave. Senior brother Li, senior brother Xiao. These disciples clearly recognized Xiao Hua and Li Zongbao. They cupped their hands and quickly walked in. All right, senior brothers, please come in. Behind Li Zongbao, Xiao Mao had already arrived. However, when he saw Li Zongbao talking to Xiao Hua, he did not greet them. Instead, he stepped forward and nodded slightly at Xiao Hua, and was about to lead the Changbai sect disciples in. Senior brother Li. A Changbai sect disciple at the front said softly, I have an older senior brother who seems to have some understanding of this strange poison. I did not dare to delay and quickly brought them over. Oh. Is that so? That's great. Li Zongbao was overjoyed. He turned around and said to Xiao Mao, invite senior brother Yi Bei from Changbai sect and senior brother Jian Boming from Qingfeng Valley over. We will discuss this together. Yes. Xiao Mao hastily turned around. Before long, two white-haired late-stage foundation building old men quickly walked over. Both of them greeted Xiao Hua. Then, the 100 or so Changbai sect disciples left with Xiao Mao. A short and wrinkled middle-stage foundation establishment cultivator stayed behind. However, Yi Bei from Changbai sect saw that this elder was unfamiliar. He cupped his hands and said, forgive me for not recognizing you, but I don't think I've seen you in the sect before. Ha, senior brother Yi, I'm only a mid-stage foundation establishment cultivator. I'm just a good-for-nothing disciple of the Changbai sect. How could the sect catch your eye? The old man smacked his dry lips and smiled apologetically. That's true. Yi Bei nodded. Changbai sect has many foundation establishment disciples. There are also many disciples from the 18 Sword Peaks. There are too many that I haven't seen before. How should I address you, junior brother? I'm Bai Fei, the elder was slightly surprised as he replied. All right, junior brother Bai, what do you know? If you can help with the detoxification this time, our lives will be saved by you. This is a great contribution. I will definitely ask for a reward for you. Chapter 25-29. This. Bai Fei bit his lips and his eyes flickered. Oh. What's wrong? Yi Bei was slightly stunned and asked curiously, could it be that you have some concerns? Hearing this, Li Zongbao and the others unconsciously took a few steps back. If Bai Fei said yes, they would retreat immediately. However, Bai Fei smiled and said in a low voice, of course not. Although this thing is very old, it is far from being a secret. Moreover, this matter is very important. I naturally won't have any concerns. Yi Bei's expression softened and he nodded. This matter concerns the lives of tens of thousands of disciples from the 3 sections. Even if it is a secret of the Changbai sect, we can't not reveal it. Just say it. If there is anything wrong, Senior Brother Li and Senior Brother Jian will bear witness. I will bear all responsibility. Actually it is not as secret as Senior Brother said. Bai Fei smiled and finally spoke, I don't want any special rewards. I just want to ask Senior Brother Yi for a cultivation method. Oh. You don't want this amazing merit? When Yi Bei heard this, he instantly felt that something was amiss. However, he still said, if your information is effective and can save the lives of these 10,000 people, not to mention the rewards from the sect, even the gratitude of these 10,000 people would be more useful than any cultivation technique. With this, won't the sect reward you with a cultivation method? Senior Brother Ye's words are naturally reasonable. Bai Fei smiled apologetically, however, these merit are all needed by Senior Brother Li, Senior Brother Shao, Senior Brother Yi and Senior Brother Jian. Why would you want merit from a nobody like me? It's not as practical as some of the sect's secret techniques. Yi Bei looked at Li Zongbao and bit his lips hard, if I can't take out this cultivation method, you will not save them? Will you let these disciples be killed by sword cultivators? Don't forget, Bai Fei, you've also been poisoned by this strange poison. If you say it out loud, who among us has a way out? Do you still have a way out? Jian Boming could not bear to watch any longer and said in a low voice. Unexpectedly, Bai Fei swept his gaze over Jian Boming and sneered, Senior Apprentice Brother Jian is probably a direct disciple of Cool Breeze Valley, right? You don't know the suffering of us low-level disciples. There are some secret techniques that we have long coveted, but no matter what kind of contributions we make, they will not be rewarded. Even if I reveal this information today, even if tens of thousands of disciples are saved, most of the battle merits will belong to others. How much will I lose? Even if I have these merits, I may not be able to give you the secret technique I want. Why can't I just ask for it? Are you sure that I know the secret technique you want? Yi Bei asked thoughtfully. Aren't you afraid that I will search your soul? Jian Boming asked coldly. Of course I'm scared. Bai Fei wasn't afraid at all. However, do you think the other disciples of the Changbai sect will just stand by and watch you perform a soul search for no reason? Do you think you'll be able to soul search the things you know? Do you think that I don't have any other fellow apprentices that I'm close to? Even so, I still want to try. Jian Boming narrowed his eyes and said in a low voice. Bai Fei, what secret technique do you want? Yi Bei glanced at Jian Boming and asked in a low voice. Bai Fei ignored Jian Boming and said to Yi Bei, I want that sword. At this point, Bai Fei glanced at Xiao Hua and the others and said a few words through voice transmission. Obviously, Yi Bei's expression didn't change when he heard this. Only the corners of his eyes twitched slightly. It was obvious that this request wasn't out of his expectations, but this request really put him in a difficult position. Of course, if Senior Apprentice Brother Yi doesn't agree, then I'll pretend that I never said this. Bai Fei said confidently. Why wouldn't I agree? Yi Bei only thought for a moment before he clapped his hands and took out 2 jade slips. He copied one of them and handed it to Bai Fei. He said, if it's for the lives of the tens of thousands of disciples of the 3 sects and the thousands of disciples of the Changbai sect, my blood oath is nothing. Good. Xiao Hua's blood boiled as he watched this. He clapped his hands and said, Senior Apprentice Brother Yi, just based on what you said, the heavens will definitely not let that bullshit blood oath take effect. Thank you for your auspicious words, Senior Apprentice Brother Xiao. Yi Bei sighed in his heart. He really didn't expect that at this critical moment, there would be a disciple of his sect like Bai Fei who would ask for a price using a jade slip. He despised and hated Bai Fei in his heart, but he had no choice but to listen to him. After all, this was the lives of tens of thousands of disciples. Wait. Jian Boming said anxiously, Bai Fei, what if the information you take out isn't related to this exotic poison? Hee, I'm in this karst cave. If the information is wrong, you can take the jade slip away at any time. Bai Fei's face was distorted with joy. He stared at the glowing jade slip in Yi Bei's hand. Give it to me. Yi Bei's expression didn't change as he stretched out his other hand. Yes. Bai Fei wasn't afraid that Yi Bei would change his mind. He opened his hand and a broken jade slip was handed over. However, when he let go of it, his other hand took the jade slip from Yi Bei's hand first. After Bai Fei read it with his divine sense, he bowed deeply and said, Thank you, Senior Apprentice Brother Yi. Humph. Yi Bei snorted and ignored him. He immersed his divine sense into the jade slip and read it. However, when he first looked at it, his face was still filled with joy, but gradually, it changed. A bitter smile appeared on his face. Everyone was surprised but they waited quietly. After a while, Yi Bei handed the jade slip to Li Zongbao with a bitter smile and said, Senior Apprentice Brother Li, take a look, what's wrong? Is the information Bai Fei gave wrong? Isn't it this exotic poison? Jian Boming said fiercely, if that's the case, even if he's a disciple of your Changbai sect, I won't forgive him. Sigh. Yi Bei shook his head and smiled bitterly, what Bai Fei gave is indeed correct. We were poisoned by the spirit-binding juice mentioned in his jade slip. However, even if we know this item and the method to detoxify this item, I'm afraid it's useless. Oh. Is that so? Even Xiao Hua was stunned when he heard this. Sure enough, after Li Zongbao finished reading, his face darkened. It was obvious that what Yi Bei said was true. Li Zongbao raised his hand to hand the jade slip to Jian Boming, but Jian Boming hurriedly stepped back and handed it to Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua did not stand on ceremony. He took the jade slip and immersed his divine sense into it for a moment. He really did not know whether to laugh or cry. He handed the jade slip back to Jian Boming and looked at Bai Fei who had already sneaked into the Changbai sect disciples in the distance. He shook his head vigorously. It turned out that according to the records in the jade slip, this so-called spirit-binding juice was once used in the sword battle 10,000 years ago. That battle was participated by the nascent soul masters. It was a sword array set up in a water-based place near the sword tomb. At that time, one nascent soul cultivator, 10 golden core cultivators and thousands of foundation establishment cultivators were ambushed. They barely escaped after losing 8 golden core cultivators and 2,000 foundation establishment cultivators. This incident caused a huge sensation at that time. Everyone in the Sky Patrol City was in a state of panic. Everyone was very afraid that they would encounter such a terrifying sword array one day. However, after the nascent soul cultivator recovered his spiritual power and discussed with many other nascent soul cultivators, he discovered that although this spirit-binding juice was powerful, it also had a huge drawback. This spirit-binding juice could only be used in water-based places with rich spiritual power. Moreover, it was only effective for 3 days. After these 3 days, the spirit-binding juice would lose its effect and the cultivator's spiritual power would gradually recover. The most ridiculous thing was that this spirit-binding juice did not require any antidote. As long as the cultivator who was affected by the spirit-binding juice left the range of water-based spiritual power and was blown by a strong wind in mid-air, the spirit-binding juice in his body would immediately disappear. Of course, after the spirit-binding juice disappeared, there were still side effects. However, the jade slip only mentioned it occasionally and did not go into detail. That day, The nascent soul cultivator persevered for 3 days before he defeated the sword array and broke out with the remaining disciples. Even those disciples with cultivation in the early stage of foundation establishment did not take any antidote, and their spiritual power was also restored. It was also this spirit-binding juice that relied on the element of surprise to kill 8 gold core cultivators and 2,000 foundation establishment cultivators. Later on, the sword cultivator used it several times, but it did not have any effect, so he did not use it again. Therefore, there were only a few records in the ancient books of many sections. By now, it had probably been forgotten by others. This Bai Fei had probably obtained the jade amulet from somewhere by chance. Only then did he know the reason for the spirit-binding juice. No wonder that Bai Fei did not want any battle merits or rewards. It's fine if others don't know about this thing, but if they do, the things on the jade slip are really not worth half a spirit stone. How can the conference hall give him battle merits? Xiao Hua sighed and said, he might as well take this opportunity to ask for some secret method of the sect. Sigh. Jian Boming also sighed when he saw this. Now that we know the origin of the spirit-binding juice, but it's useless. It's useful. Xiao Mao smiled and said, we only need to persevere for 2 more days and this spirit-binding juice will be removed. It's a pity that Qin Jian won't give us 2 more days. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. With Qin Jian's cunning, how could he let them recover their spiritual power? Xiao Hua even felt that gathering tens of thousands of people here might be Qin Jian's arrangement to catch them all in one fell swoop. That's right. Li Zongbao nodded. I think we'll be able to. Woo-woo, a faint sound like a cow mooing came from afar, followed by the sound of water dripping into everyone's ears. This is... Xiao Hua's expression changed slightly. He suddenly thought of the river he saw in Flowing Ice Valley and immediately understood. He said anxiously, not good. Qin Jian poured the river water of Flowing Ice Valley into the karst cave. Of course, the entrance of Flowing Ice Valley's spirit stone vein was in the river. It was easy to pour the river water in. Besides, Qin Jian had already made arrangements. There were probably more than 10 entrances to the river. Chapter 25-30. Under normal circumstances, these foundation building cultivators and even aura refining cultivators wouldn't pay attention to this surging river water, but what about now? The river water would definitely stimulate the effect of the spirit binding juice, and cultivators would also have to use their magic power to avoid the river water. No matter how one looked at it, pouring the river water was the most poisonous trick. That's right, it was the river water. Soon, the sound of the surging river water and waves hitting the karst cave quickly spread over. Of course, many cultivators began to panic. Follow me. At this moment, Xiao Hua made up his mind and waved his hand. I have a way. Oh. Junior Marshal Brother Xiao. Li Zongbao was stunned at first, then he was overjoyed because Xiao Hua had never disappointed him. Li Zongbao hastily flew into the air and shouted, disciples of all sects, get into formation and follow us out. Junior Marshal Brother Xiao Hua of the Imperial Thunder sect has already found a way out. Thank you, Senior Marshal Brother Xiao. Thank you, Senior Marshal Brother Li. Everyone cheered loudly, and a few aura refining disciples were almost crying tears of joy. Seeing Li Zongbao's momentum, Xiao Hua said anxiously, Senior Marshal Brother Li, I only have a way. I don't dare to say it'll be completely useful. As long as it's a way, it might be useful. Li Zongbao answered indifferently, if it's not like this, they'll be in chaos first. How will we defend against the enemy? How will we contend against the river water? Xiao Hua nodded, feeling his shoulders immediately become heavy again. Not daring to be negligent, Xiao Hua hastily flew out of the karst cave, closed his eyes, released his Buddhist sense, and flew towards the place marked previously. Xiao Hua muttered as he flew, secretly praying that he wouldn't lose it this time. Perhaps Xiao Hua's prayer was effective, or perhaps Xiao Hua's Buddhist sense was effective. In short, after a while, Xiao Hua successfully found the karst cave marked last. It's here. Xiao Hua heaved a long sigh of relief, feeling as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders. There's a way out here? Li Zongbao scanned with his divine sense and saw another karst cave without a way out. Beside him, Xiao Mao was also surprised. There's no way out now, but this little brother will soon find a way out. Xiao Hua flew into the cave and clapped his hands. The seal of overturning sea landed in his hands. With a tap of his hand, the seal of overturning sea rapidly expanded. Seal of overturning the sea? Li Zongbao exclaimed in shock. Where did you get it from? Ah. You actually recognize him? Xiao Hua was speechless. According to Ji Yi, this thing had disappeared for thousands of years. How could Li Zongbao from the Utmost Happiness faction recognize it? Li Zongbao frowned as if he thought of something and said, I know a thing or two about the famous magic treasures of the various sections. The seal of the Changbai sect is also famous in Meng, how can I not know? Although he had mysteriously disappeared for 1,000 years, to think that he had fallen into the hands of a sword cultivator, I have no other choice. Xiao Hua pointed at the rock wall and said, I can only rely on the magic power in my body to activate the seal of overturning the sea to break through this place. Other than that, there is indeed no other way. Good brother. Li Zongbao nodded. Go ahead and do it. This thing is given to you by me. Ugh. Xiao Hua shook his head. I'm afraid this reason is not very useful. Li Zongbao came to his senses and looked outside the karst cave. He said, I will go out now and ask many disciples to set up a defense in front of the karst cave. First, they will block the river water. Second, they will block the sword cultivators. I will not let them in. Thank you, Senior Brother Li. As he spoke, Xiao Hua activated his magic power. The seal of overturning the sea emitted a yellow brilliance. Spiritual chi of heaven and earth gathered like a swarm of bees. Lines of jade appeared on the seal of overturning the sea. Go! Xiao Hua shouted. He grasped the seal of overturning the sea with his bare hands and used his strength to smash it at the place he had chosen earlier. Boom! An earth-shattering sound rang out and the entire karst cave shook. A hole of several feet in size and several feet deep was smashed out by the seal of overturning the sea. Countless stones fell down from the sky with a crackling sound. When Li Zongbao saw that Xiao Hua had taken action, he didn't have time to ask why he had chosen this place. He hurriedly flew out of the karst cave. Li Zongbao raised the divine piercing whip in his hand and shouted, Disciples, listen to my command. Whoever dares to use his divine sense to spy on the karst cave, whoever dares to take half a step into the karst cave will be killed by me. Disciples of the Utopia faction, set up a defense in the center. Disciples of the Taibai faction, set up a defense in the left. Disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley, set up a defense in the right. The terrain here is very high. We will release our magic weapons to block the river water. Don't let the river water rush into the karst cave. As long as we hold on for a few breaths, the river water will naturally flow to another place. Yes, we understand. Although the disciples didn't know what Li Zongbao, Xiao Hua, and Xiao Mao were doing in the karst cave, they saw that only Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao came out. Xiao Hua must be doing something inside. At this time, the loud rumbling sound had already reached everyone's ears. Those who were smart already knew what Xiao Hua was thinking. Although Xiao Hua's action was really the stupidest method, at this time, what other methods did they have? Although Xiao Hua's method was the stupidest, it was the most effective. As long as the path was opened, they could rush out of the underground. Then, the sword cultivators and the spirit-binding juice would be turned into smoke. Therefore, these disciples were very obedient to Li Zongbao's arrangement. They took out their magic weapons and lined up in a formation. With their backs to the karst cave, they quietly waited for the river water to come. Of course, they didn't dare to use their divine sense to spy on the karst cave. They were afraid that Li Zongbao's divine piercing whip would fall on their bodies. However, in the formation of the Changbai sect, the disciple Bai Fei, who had just exchanged the spirit-binding juice jade pendant for one of Yi Bei's secret arts of the Changbai sect, was shocked again. He took out his flying sword and waited for the river water to come. At the same time, he listened carefully. The sound of Xiao Hua hitting the rock wall with the seal of the tumbling sea came again and again. First, it was like an earthquake. Then, the sound became softer and softer, but the vibration was still there. After listening for a while, Bai Fei's face suddenly showed astonishment. Then, joy appeared in his eyes. Then, Bai Fei turned and flew towards the karst cave. Bai Fei, what are you doing? Yi Bei was behind the Changbai sect disciples. Seeing Bai Fei's strange behavior, he shouted angrily. All right, senior brother Yi, this little brother has something to tell senior brother Xiao Hua Xiao. Bai Fei shouted. It's important, it's absolutely important. Stop. Yi Bei sneered. What other shady business do you want to do? Don't take advantage of our kindness. I wouldn't dare, Bai Fei smiled bitterly. This matter is really important. It's definitely different from before. If there's any falsehood this time, I'll let senior brother Xiao punish me. Yi Bei was a bit embarrassed and looked at Li Zongbao. Come here. Li Zongbao originally wanted to refuse, but when he thought about how this guy actually had a jade talisman that recorded a poison like the spirit-binding juice from 10,000 years ago, he knew that he definitely had something else. Bai Fei arrived in front of Li Zongbao and stole a glance at the karst cave. He transmitted his voice. I'll be frank. Did senior brother Xiao Hua use my Changbai sect's cloud-suppressing seal or ocean-overturning seal to break through the walls? How do you know? Li Zongbao's expression didn't change. I judged it from the sound. Bai Fei didn't hide it. I have the secret technique to use these two items. I'm willing to give it to you. Oh. Li Zongbao was moved. He knew that even if Xiao Hua had the ocean-overturning seal, he might not have the complete method to refine and use it. I don't know whether it's these two treasures or not. Li Zongbao said coldly. He couldn't be bothered to deal with this rare oddity in a Dao cultivator battle. Then. I'll have to ask senior brother Li. This concerns my life. I can't just sit back and do nothing. Bai Fei said with deep emotion. Oh. So, you're willing to give it out for free? Li Zongbao looked at Bai Fei strangely. He really didn't believe it. Hee, of course I can't give it out for free. Bai Fei smiled apologetically. However, my condition is very simple. I'm sure senior brother Li can fulfill it. Tell me. Li Zongbao didn't ask for the jade slip at all. He just asked for the conditions first. It's nothing. Just two conditions. Bai Fei's eyes were filled with hope. Say it. Li Zongbao replied indifferently. The first condition is very simple. If this passage is broken through, I hope to pass through after senior brother Li and the two senior brothers Xiao. Or if the three senior brothers don't take the lead, then I'll be the fourth. Bai Fei bit his lips and smiled apologetically. The second condition. The second condition is also very simple. I need a cultivation method and a flying sword. The cultivation method is for sword cultivators. It can be cultivated all the way to the third grade of illusory sword. The flying sword is for illusory sword swordsmen. What? Li Zongbao was stunned. You're a Changbai sect disciple and a Taoist sect cultivator. What do you need the flying sword and cultivation method for? Senior brother Li, you don't have to worry about this. Bai Fei smiled embarrassedly. Senior brother Li and the two senior brothers Xiao are so brave, they must have this item in their storage pouches. As long as senior brother Li agrees, this little brother will immediately give senior brother Xiao the secret technique of refining and using the seal. I don't have what you want. Li Zongbao waved his sleeves and shook his head. What about the other senior brother Xiao? As he spoke, Bai Fei looked at Xiao Mao. However, he had been transmitting his voice to Li Zongbao. Xiao Mao didn't know at all. When he saw the white-haired old man looking at him, he was rather surprised. What he didn't know was that he had been promoted to senior brother in this old man's words. Forget it. Li Zongbao said indifferently. You wait. I'll ask junior brother Xiao first. Thank you, senior brother Li. Bai Fei's lips curled into a smile. He was very sure that his ears didn't mishear. Xiao Hua would definitely exchange with him. Sure enough, when Xiao Hua heard Li Zongbao's words, he couldn't help but be shocked. What? Bai Fei can actually hear with his own ears that. I'm using the seal of overturning the sea. How can this be? It seems like it's true. Li Zongbao nodded. This guy is also a genius. If he used his mind on the righteous path, he should have achieved great success. However, his methods are somewhat despicable. In my opinion, his future achievements will be limited. Chapter 25-31. Xiao Hua said with a smile, that's your opinion. Bai Fei might not think so. Moreover, he deliberately searched for every opportunity to cultivate. Every step was calculated by him. His achievements might not be inferior to yours and mine. So much so that he'll far surpass us in the future. Heaven rewards the diligent, but heaven doesn't reward despicable people. Even if his cultivation far surpasses mine and his methods are contemptible, I still don't think highly of him. He doesn't need you to think highly of him. Xiao Hua angrily responded to Li Zongbao. Alas, that's true. Li Zongbao actually understood in his heart. He sighed, everyone has their own way of cultivating. Everyone has their own way of living. Why should I impose my own way of thinking on others? Moreover, Bai Fei's plan is really common on Dawn Rain Continent, and it's also really effective. Now, which cultivator doesn't look at immediate benefits and place the great Tao at the bottom of cultivation advancement? That's right. Seeing Li Zongbao sigh with emotion, Xiao Hua smiled, go get his jade slip. If it's useful, I'll agree to his conditions. I'll go right away. Li Zongbao said and was about to turn back, but at this time, Xiao Hua stopped Li Zongbao again, and said, also, senior brother Li, the river is about to arrive, but the swordsmen haven't attacked yet. Blocking the river doesn't require so many people, right? Let the remaining disciples come over. Each of them will consume 10% of their magic power to help me open up the passage. There are thousands of disciples here. Even if each of them opens up 3 feet, those 3 will still be 10 feet. If everyone works hard, it'll be close to 2,000 feet, almost a dozen miles. It's much more effective than me doing it myself. Li Zongbao looked at the passage that Xiao Hua opened up, and shook his head slightly. Human strength is sometimes limited. You can think of borrowing the power of other cultivators at this juncture, it's really praiseworthy. However, even if you say so, it might not work. Just now, I also thought about this. Among the thousands of disciples, at most 60% will have suitable treasures. Among these 60% will be at the mid or late foundation establishment stage. In fact, less than 40% will be able to come out. Also, the higher you go, the more difficult it will be. Even the inner layer of restrictions is not something we can break. That formation also consumes a lot of magic power, so don't be too optimistic. And that's indeed the case. Xiao Hua also nodded. Just now, when I was circulating my energy, I was already thinking about it. However, I might not be able to clear it by myself. Only with the help of these disciples will we be able to succeed. Li Zongbao nodded and instructed, all right, expand the passageway a little more. When the passageway gets deeper, one disciple will enter, and the other will follow. Don't waste time. Got it. Also, tell them to put the broken stones into their storage bags. Don't worry, everyone knows about such details. Li Zongbao said disapprovingly. Yes. Little brother will expand the passageway right now. Xiao Hua agreed, swinging his arms, he started to work hard. Not long after, Li Zongbao came back with an old jade pendant, which was similar to the one that Bai Fei had given to Yi Bei. Xiao Hua looked at it with his divine thought, and a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes. He snorted coldly and said, Bai Fei was right. This is indeed the secret art of refining and using the cloud-suppressing seal, the sea-overturning seal, and the mountain-crushing seal. It's absolutely correct. This Bai Fei, what's his background? How could he have so many secret arts of the Changbai sect? Who cares who he is? Li Zongbao sneered. He's just a disciple in the middle stage of the foundation establishment stage. He's not from the Utopia faction. He can do whatever he wants. All right. Xiao Hua said, and took out a sword slip and a flying sword from the space and gave them to Li Zongbao. He said, give this to Bai Fei. Little brother will go to the side to refine the sea-overturning seal. I still need to comprehend the secret art of using it. You let the other disciples come in and open the passageway. Li Zongbao didn't say anything. He took the sword slip and the flying sword and walked out. Not long after, the disciples of the Utopia faction came in first. One by one, they rushed into the passageway that Xiao Hua had already opened, which was more than 10 feet long. At this time, the rumbling sound of waves could be heard from outside. The torrential river water had already rushed into the karst cave with a huge amount of ice. According to Li Zongbao's previous arrangement, the disciples of the three factions each stood in a place and took out their magic weapons. The magic weapons emitted a bright brilliance, like a barrier blocking the river water. Everyone looked at the different magic weapons in the river water. The magic power in their bodies was like the river water, and disappeared very quickly. They were terrified. If it weren't for the calm disciples like Li Zongbao, and the support of the disciples like Xiao Hua who could find a way to escape, they really didn't dare to imagine what would happen to them if they were alone in the river water. Disciples, if more than half of your magic power is consumed, immediately withdraw and let the disciples behind you support you. Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao stood behind the crowd. Li Zongbao arranged for the disciples to enter the karst cave to open the passageway. Xiao Mao saw the light curtain in front of him faintly flickering and immediately shouted. Yes, we understand. The crowd of disciples shouted. Their voices rushed into the karst cave and echoed back and forth. The momentum was like a rainbow, suppressing the torrential river water. The river water seemed to be endless. In one breath, it poured in for less than half an hour. Although the cultivators guarding in front of them had changed dozens of times, the river water still continued to surge. The waves in front of the light curtain were several feet long. Looking inside the karst cave, the disciples of the Utopia faction had all entered. Li Zongbao roughly estimated that there were less than 2,000 people. Moreover, he had already asked the disciples who fell in the passageway. Their magic weapons were not suitable for them, and the rock wall was incomparably hard. Each person could only open about 2 feet of the wall, and they were powerless to do more. However, even so, Li Zongbao estimated that there should be a distance of 3 to 4 miles. Moreover, as the height increased, the disciples flew up and down, which consumed a lot of magic power. Originally, they entered the passageway one by one, but now, the passageway, which was more than 3 miles long, accommodated nearly 40 disciples of the Utopia faction. Alas, how deep is this karst cave? Li Zongbao sighed. When I came in, I didn't think it was so deep. Oh no. Senior Li. While Li Zongbao was thinking, Xiao Mao flew in and said hurriedly, the river water has gradually stopped, but the sword cultivators are attacking again. There are also thousands of them. Hearing this, Li Zongbao was a little surprised, but it was not beyond his expectations. He waved his hand and said, disciples of the Utopia faction, listen to my order. We will go out to meet the enemy. Let the disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley come in. Yes. The rest of the disciples of the Utopia faction flew out, and the disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley outside the karst cave lined up and flew in again. At this time, the river water had stopped flowing. However, in front of the defensive light curtain, nearly 3 feet of river water gathered and did not recede. Looking into the distance, there was a black mass of sword cultivators crossing the river water on their flying swords and rushing over. Good. My fellow cultivators, now is the key to our survival. The cultivators inside are breaking through the rock wall. We only need to hold on to the end, and we will be able to escape from here. Li Zongbao flew in the air and said coldly as his holy whip emitted a faint golden light. Senior Li. Yi Bei of the Changbai sect saluted and said, now that we have reached the most critical moment, we disciples of the Changbai sect do not dare to hide anything anymore. In this battle, we disciples of the Changbai sect will take the lead, and the disciples of the Utopia faction and the Cool Breeze Valley will help us on both sides. What do you think? Great. Li Zongbao clapped his hands and said, I want to see the secret arts of the Changbai sect. All right. Yi Bei raised his hand and said loudly, Junior brothers, we've been forced to a dead end now, and we've fulfilled our blood oath. Since it's like this, then let's allow those damnable sword cultivators to see who's the true cultivator of the sword. Kill. Then, nearly 3,000 disciples of the Changbai sect flew up. About 40% of the disciples were standing on flying swords like the sword cultivators, and all kinds of sword lights were shining. The other 60% of the disciples were using the flying technique, and they were holding the usual Taoist flying swords. However, they were all charging towards the sword cultivators without hesitation. This. Li Zongbao was stunned at first, but then he understood. He waved his hand and said, disciples of the Utopia faction, listen to my command, kill. Kill. Nearly 2,000 disciples of the Utopia faction flew up and activated their magic weapons to fight against the enemies. Just as Li Zongbao flew up, an old man said hurriedly, Senior Li, don't fight against the enemies. You still need to stay in the middle and guard the karst cave. This karst cave is the key to our escape. Li Zongbao stopped in the air and thought for a while. Then he bowed and said, Thank you, junior brother. Okay. The old man had already flown up and rushed into the battle. Then, Li Zongbao looked at the 2,000 disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley and said a few words to Jian Boming. Jian Boming waved his hand and said, Disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley, listen to my command. We will split into two groups. One group will fly into the karst cave as soon as possible and open up the passage. Then we will immediately get into formation to fight against the enemies. The other group will follow me to fight against the enemies. Yes. Naturally, the 1,000 disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley who stayed behind turned around and flew into the air under Jian Boming's command. They formed a formation and rushed towards the sword cultivators. Suddenly, the karst cave that had been silent for a day and a night was filled with the sounds of killing again. However, the fight this time was different from the previous one. The sword cultivators were clearly delaying. They would either form a sword formation to attack the cultivators, or they would fight the cultivators on their flying swords. Whenever there was danger, they would immediately retreat. They did not fight to the death with the cultivators. On the other hand, the cultivators were stingy with their magic power and did not dare to forcefully chase after them. The flying techniques of the swordsmen were originally faster than that of the cultivators. As a result, in the time it took to brew a cup of tea, although there were many screams, most of them were cultivators who died. The number of swordsmen who fell into the river was even fewer. Of course, it was good that the cultivators today were not afraid of the sword cultivators. They still had some strength left in them, so it seemed that they were not in a bad situation. Chapter 25-32. Very quickly, another hour passed. Half of the Cool Breeze Valley disciples had entered the tunnel, but the progress of the tunnel was even more severe. After asking, Li Zongbao knew that the tunnel was less than 2 miles long. When the second batch of Cool Breeze Valley disciples prepared to enter the karst cave, another problem occurred. After an hour of fighting, not to mention the casualties, even the returning disciples had expended more than half of their spiritual power. They flew up the tunnel, used their spiritual power again, and flew back to the karst cave. The amount of spiritual power they could use was even less. When they entered the battle again, the situation was even more dangerous. In other words, these disciples could either stay here and kill sword cultivators or enter the cave to open the tunnel. If they did both, their lives would be in danger. Li Zongbao was a bit anxious, but he had no choice. This tunnel could not be opened by Xiao Hua alone. He could only let the Cool Breeze Valley disciples open the tunnel as much as possible. Looking at the sword cultivator disciples, they saw that the cultivators who were fighting with them had suddenly retreated and lined up to retreat into the karst cave in the distance. Seeing that there were other disciples coming out of the karst cave, they naturally felt strange. After a while, the swordsmen who were in charge immediately realized that something was amiss. On one hand, they changed their tactics and tried their best to encourage the swordsmen to fight, while on the other hand, they hurriedly sent out swordsmen to report. Seeing this, Li Zongbao was even more anxious. At this time, it was the drawing sword and the nurturing sword disciples who were fighting. Not a single illusory swordsman had appeared. Even so, all the Dao sect cultivators should only have half of their dermic powers left in their bodies, right? As time passed, the spirit-binding juice continued to devour his magic power. His previous thought of persevering for another 2 days and 2 nights was absolutely wishful thinking. All the paths were blocked, and he could only hope that the tunnel and the cave behind him would open up in time. The swordsmen changed their tactics, and their morale soared. The cultivators were completely suppressed, and many of the disciples fell from the sky, never to emerge from the river again. Looking at the Changbai sect disciples at the front, they activated their sword energy and stepped on their flying swords to meet the swordsmen. Their flying swords were filled with sword intent and sword chi. They were no different from the flying swords of the sword cultivators. The sword cultivators were shocked at first, but then they sneered and skillfully controlled their flying swords to fight against the Changbai sect disciples. At first, the two sides were evenly matched and the Changbai sect disciples even had a slight advantage. But in just the time it took to eat a meal, the Changbai sect disciples were at a disadvantage. After all, they were used to using magic to control their swords. At first, they could still concentrate, but as the danger increased, they started to make mistakes. As a result, naturally, many Changbai sect disciples used sword energy to fly on their swords while using their vital essence to activate their flying swords to fight against the swordsmen. This was supposed to be the best choice between the two sections. It should have been effective. However, after a short while, many disciples of the Changbai sect showed signs of pain. It seemed that there was a problem with the flying sword. After a long time, several disciples even fell into the river for no apparent reason. Therefore, the Changbai sect disciples were forced to take back their sword cultivator flying swords and focus on channeling their magic power to use their Dao sect flying swords to fight the enemy. Of course, even so, the Changbai sect disciples used the least amount of magic power. In this battle, they were the main force against the sword cultivators. Seeing the situation, Li Zongbao wanted to call the Changbai sect disciples back and prepare to enter the tunnel, but he gave up. Opening the tunnel was important, but they could not underestimate the enemy. If the Changbai sect disciples were to retreat, the sword cultivators would be able to reach the karst cave. Not to mention the tunnel could not be opened, all the cultivators would die. Senior brotherly, what's the situation? Xiao Hua quietly appeared behind Li Zongbao. Not good. Li Zongbao's face was dark. If we can't open the tunnel in an hour, when the thousands of disciples run out of magic power, we will all be souls under the sword of the sword cultivators. Sigh. Xiao Hua also sighed. He did not know how long the tunnel would be, but he knew that Li Zongbao was right. Even if he rushed up now, it would be like throwing a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. His magic power would not be able to resist many sword cultivators. I will follow the Cool Breeze Valley disciples to open the tunnel. The other disciples do not need to come. Xiao Hua looked at the Cool Breeze Valley disciples who were still waiting to enter the karst cave and said, "Okay." Li Zongbao glanced at Xiao Hua and nodded slightly. "I will leave this matter to junior brother Xiao. We will definitely stall for time and leave you some time. Let's pray that the rock wall is not too deep." Xiao Hua smiled. "I only have so much magic power. If I run out of magic power and still can't open the rock wall, it will be useless no matter how much time we have. Then Bai Fei's secret technique. Li Zongbao did not forget to ask as he turned around. It's the real deal. Xiaohua only answered with 4 words and then followed behind a Cool Breeze Valley disciple. Under Jian Boming's arrangement, the remaining Cool Breeze Valley disciples charged into the Dao sect cultivators who had already fallen into a declining battle. Xiaohua had already flown to an extremely deep passageway when he saw a disciple flying out, followed by another disciple flying in. He then used his divine perception to scan the Cool Breeze Valley's disciples who stopped every 10 feet or so in the passageway. He sighed with emotion. There's strength in numbers, there's no mistake about that. Previously, I thought that I could open the tunnel by myself, but now that I see it, I really do not know the immensity of heaven and earth. How many miles have we gone? I'm afraid it's 6 to 7 miles. I haven't reached the end yet. If I were to open the tunnel by myself, I'm afraid that 1 mile would be the limit, right? However, if Xiaohua's 1 mile was heard by others, they would definitely be dumbfounded. 1 mile was 150 feet. Other cultivators could only shoot out 1 or 2 feet, and that was already not bad. This guy directly shot out 100 feet. How could others live with this? As the Cool Breeze Valley disciples flew out one by one, Xiaohua also flew into the tunnel. At this time, the tunnel was a few feet wide, barely enough for the 2 of them to brush past each other. Just as Xiaohua was calculating where to go, a disciple above him transmitted a message, reporting to senior brother Xiao, the senior brother in front has encountered a restriction. He is unable to break the formation. Please give us your orders. Ha ha ha. Great. Hearing this, Xiaohua could not help but be overjoyed. Since they had reached the formation, how far could the surface be? You all can go out. I will take care of the rest. Xiaohua laughed loudly. You all send a message to senior brother Li. If there are no accidents, an hour should be enough. Yes. That disciple passed the message to his superiors. He immediately cupped his hands towards Xiaohua and flew down, saying, Thank you for everything, senior brother Xiao. I will never forget this great favor. I don't dare. Xiaohua was all smiles as he watched that disciple land. However, who would have thought that the remaining disciples seemed to have made an agreement? Each of them said one sentence after another with such sincerity that Xiaohua really could not bear it. After waiting for the 40 disciples to leave, Xiaohua also flew to the top of the passage. He saw that there was a layer of restriction that was surging with blue light. The blue brilliance was like rippling water. If there were some fish swimming in it, it would definitely be like seawater. Hiss, Xiaohua scanned with his divine sense and took a deep breath. He said curiously, this is clearly the formation of a Dao sect cultivator. It is not a sword cultivator's sword formation. Then, Xiaohua used his Dharma eyes to look for a moment and found that the spirit-binding juice had fused with this formation. Moreover, it was now dispersing into the rock wall along with the formation from time to time. I understand. Xiaohua nodded slightly. Since I can understand Buddhism and the Changbai sect disciples can practice the flying swords of sword cultivators, why can't sword cultivators practice my Dao sect spells and formations? This flowing ice valley formation probably did not have any special changes and it was used by that bastard Qin Jian. Fine. Fine. Fine, I don't care what kind of formation it is. Even if it is a sword formation, in my hands, it is just a piece of paper. Xiaohua waved his hand and took out the rabbit spirit talisman. He opened his Dharma eye and examined it. Then, he placed the spirit talisman on the weak point of the array. Immediately after, he grabbed the spirit talisman with his hand. The spirit talisman flashed with brilliance, and several small dots began to vibrate within the blue brilliance. All of the brilliance slowly overlapped, and slowly linked together. Finally, it formed a rapid whirlpool. When the whirlpool spun faster and faster, a hole several feet in size appeared within the array. Humph, I don't dare to touch you now. In a moment, I will show you how powerful I am. Xiaohua waved his hand again and threw 2 fire talismans at the hole in the rock wall. Then, he took a deep breath and activated his Dharma powers. With a slap of his hand, the yellow overturned ocean seal flew out. Quick! Xiaohua chanted and his hands formed a seal. The Dharma powers in his body surged and rushed into his fingertips. As the Dharma powers entered the overturned ocean seal didn't expand like before. Instead, it suddenly sucked in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and emitted a fierce roar. Then, the dragon head coiled around the overturned ocean seal suddenly raised and actually let out a dragon roar. Moreover, the dragon body coiled around the overturned ocean seal also began to move. Attack! Xiaohua knew that his time was limited and didn't dare to be negligent. He pointed his finger again and saw the coiling dragon fly away from the overturned ocean seal. It opened its mouth in midair and actually sucked the overturned ocean seal into its mouth. Woo! A thunderous sound reverberated. The coiling dragon held the overturned ocean seal in its mouth and charged straight into the rock wall. Rumble! A loud sound rang out and the tunnel was opened by nearly 10 feet. Damn it, it is indeed powerful. The Dharma powers used are much less than before, but the effect is several times more. A complete Dharma treasure is indeed powerful. Although Xiaohua was looking forward to it, the result was really beyond his expectations. He originally thought that it would be good if he could push it out 30 to 40 feet. Who knew that it would actually be close to 10 feet? A secret technique is indeed a secret technique. A secret technique combined with a Dharma treasure is even more powerful. Xiaohua pondered that Bai Fei took this opportunity to blackmail me, but every cultivator carries a humble heart to comprehend the heavenly Tao. Every cultivator racked their brains to find a 1 in 10,000 chance to raise their cultivation. Perhaps Bai Fei didn't have a chance like me. I'm afraid that he could only use this chance to thicken his face and ask me for a sword cultivator's sword technique. Forget it, who cares about him? I will benefit even more from this. Chapter 25-33. Thinking about this, Xiaohua's view of Bai Fei gradually improved. Ignoring everything else, he urged his Fa Li to activate the seal of the overturning sea in one go. That earthen yellow dragon shape rushed out from Xiaohua's hand again, and each time it penetrated deeper into the earth. Xiaohua was secretly delighted. He understood that this layer of earth was about to reach its end. However, Xiaohua was still happy too early. The seal of the overturning sea was a complete magic treasure. The amount of Fa Li required to activate it was definitely not ordinary. Xiaohua was already much more careful, but seeing that the true yuan in his body was gradually drying up, the front was still pitch black and there were no signs of it reaching its end. Granny, I won't fail, right? Xiaohua was somewhat restless. How about, this young master uses the wishful staff again? Secretly taking a deep breath, Xiaohua very naturally activated his cultivation technique. Just as he activated it, he immediately came to a realization and hurriedly stopped his cultivation technique. This was because this was drinking poison to quench thirst. However, at this moment, Xiaohua's heart suddenly flashed with a bolt of lightning. This young master is confused. That Qin Jian used the flowing ice valleys array to activate the spirit binding juice. Even if there is spirit binding juice on top of this forbidden technique, but most of it should be facing downwards. This place is already close to the top of the cliff, how could there be a lot of spirit binding juice? Thus, Xiaohua impatiently opened his eyes. Sure enough, the azure color near him was very faint. It was not even different from what he usually saw. Ha ha ha, Xiaohua laughed loudly. He hurriedly waved his hand and a few pills entered his mouth. A wave of pure heaven and earth spiritual qi rushed into Xiaohua's meridians. Xiaohua took advantage of this to activate his cultivation technique. The long-lost true yuan immediately began to circulate. Although some true yuan suddenly disappeared, compared to the newly formed true yuan, it was still a bit less. This young master understands now. This spirit-binding juice was probably left in this young master's body before. Didn't that Bai Fei's jade amulet say that it was good? It can be removed with just a blow of the wind. There's no wind here, so I'll let it have wind. Xiaohua waved his hand and several more elixirs entered his mouth. Immediately after, the immortal body bestowment technique and dragon transformation art circulated once more. The surrounding world's spirit qi turned into tiny hurricanes and poured into Xiaohua's body. Within his meridians and body, the amount of true origin that was regenerated increased. Very quickly, it exceeded the amount of true origin that was disappearing. Clearly, as the world's spirit qi poured into Xiaohua's body, the spirit-binding juice in Xiaohua's body was gradually removed. Watch me. With true essence, what was there for Xiaohua to be afraid of? He roared and no longer held back on his magic power. Almost all of his magic power was channeled into the sea overturning seal. Roar. The yellow dragon on the sea overturning seal was also as excited as Xiaohua. It roared and held the seal in its mouth as it rushed into the soil again and again. Rumble. Xiaohua had actually forcefully activated the seal of overturning sea to attack the passageway for nearly the time it took to eat a meal. He reckoned that he had probably opened up another several kilometers of passageway. This time, he heard a loud noise, and a strand of starlight was reflected in his eyes. Soon after, a gust of cold wind blew into the passageway. Great! Xiaohua hastily withdrew his magic power and put away the sea overturning seal, afraid that it would attract the attention of the sword cultivators. He also didn't delay in the slightest. He took a few pills, turned around, and used the awakening lightning escape technique to fly into the cave. The battle inside the cave was really tragic. Every cultivator fought until the very last moment. The magic power in their bodies could only support them for a few breaths of time. Many people's gazes looked towards the cave from time to time. Everyone's figure also involuntarily gathered towards the cave. Li Zongbao and Xiaohua had agreed on an hour. However, this hour had already passed, and he still hadn't received any message from Xiaohua. I'm afraid that today will be the day of my fall. Li Zongbao urged his magic power. The immortal piercing whip drew a golden whip shadow and repelled a sword cultivator. Li Zongbao sighed and habitually looked towards the cave. Unfortunately, this time, it was still the same. There was no figure that surprised him. Hiss, eat my whip. Looking at the sword cultivator who was repelled by him flying towards him again, Li Zongbao was angry. When he was about to urge his magic power again, he saw a crimson-red messaging charm flying in front of his eyes. Xiaohua. Li Zongbao almost cried with joy. There were too many surprises in this world. How could he, who practiced the parting love treasure mirror, endure? When he took the messaging charm and scanned it with his divine thought, he immediately shouted, "Fellow cultivators, Xiaohua of the Imperial Thunder Sect has opened the passage. We will act according to the previous discussion." Senior Li. Not far away, Bai Fei was still alive. He hurriedly said, "Don't forget about me. You're the first to go out." Li Zongbao was extremely disdainful and pointed with his finger. "Thank you, Senior Li," Bai Fei shouted. He left his opponent and immediately rushed into the cave. Seeing Bai Fei run away, the disciples were a little confused. "Don't panic. Disciples of the Utopia faction, listen to my command. Turn the formation outward and let the disciples of the Changbai sect and the Cool Breeze Valley go first." "Yes." The disciples of the Utopia faction shouted loudly and responded. "Ha, ha, ha, Senior Li, you've underestimated the disciples of the Changbai sect." Yi Bei was injured, but he shouted straightforwardly, "I will lead the disciples of the Changbai sect to accompany the fellow cultivators of the Utopia faction. Let the disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley go first." "Good. A friend in need is a friend indeed." Li Zongbao clapped his hands and said, "Junior Yi, you're my friend. There's also me." Jian Boming's injuries were more serious, but he was also full of pride. He flew into the air and said, let the injured disciples and those who don't have enough magic power go first. We'll bring up the rear. Ha, 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 there's also me. Xiao Mao was also injured, but he also flew to stand beside Li Zongbao. Good, everyone laughed heartily. However, their divine senses scanned the surroundings vigilantly. When the disciples of the three factions heard the words of the three people, even though they had a strong desire to live, they did not dare to be too presumptuous. Not to mention, there were many disciples who stood in front of Li Zongbao and the others, ready to fight to the death. In fact, the situation was as such. The passage could only allow 2 people to go out at the same time. If they left early, they could escape. But if they left late, or even slightly late, how could they escape? Don't forget, there were thousands of swordsmen. How could they let the cultivators escape so easily? Li Zongbao, Yi Bei, and Jian Boming's words were their final plan. They knew in their hearts that among the 6,000 cultivators, there were about 2,000 who would not be able to escape. The 3 of them would be the last 3, hoping that they could save more cultivators by fighting to the death. The injured disciples rushed into the karst cave in an orderly manner, but it was troublesome to enter the passageway. Under everyone's command, the entrance to the passageway was a mess. Many disciples rushed in, causing chaos. Xiao Mao. You go and command them. Li Zongbao pointed and shouted. Yes, I understand. Xiao Mao received the order and hurriedly flew to the entrance of the karst cave. Li Zongbao's voice rang in his ears again. Xiao Hua entrusted you to me, so I have to think for you. When the time is right, enter the passage. Xiao Mao bit his lips slightly and did not reply. He only flew to the entrance of the passage and scolded, Don't rush. You, go first. You, follow behind. Alas, this is a real man. Li Zongbao saw that Xiao Mao did not respond and knew what Xiao Mao was thinking. He secretly shook his head and waved the holy piercing whip again to command the disciples of the Utopia faction to resist the crazy attacks of the swordsmen. As long as one was a human, there would always be competition in their hearts. Even cultivators were the same. If there was no one to lead them and they saw someone else enter the passage before them, they would definitely mutter, Why is it you and not me? When will I be able to enter the passage? But if there was someone to command first, the cultivator had a rule in his heart. He knew that it would be his turn soon, so he would listen to the command of others. Not to mention that Xiao Mao was now famous for his fighting prowess. Everyone was very convinced by him. When Xiao Mao came to mediate, order was quickly restored. More and more people left, and fewer people stayed. However, the attacks of the swordsmen did not stop. In fact, they were even more ferocious. Li Zongbao and the others could not hold on any longer. Seeing that there were still more than 3,000 people left, Li Zongbao sighed and looked up. Tens of thousands of swordsmen activated their flying swords. Every time, they would take away a life. Every drop of blood sprinkled into the river, to be able to save 3,000 people, is already good enough. Li Zongbao thought to himself and shouted again, Fellow cultivator Jian, fellow cultivator Yi, you and the others should also prepare to leave. We will leave as many as we can. Let the disciples closest to the karst cave retreat. Yi Bei saw that there were fewer and fewer people in the karst cave and shouted loudly. Ha ha ha. Damn it. You're squeezing me to death. Just when Li Zongbao was about to agree, he heard a bright laughter in the small karst cave. Senior brother Xiao is here, senior brother Xiao is back. Everyone in the karst cave cheered loudly, as if they had suddenly found a pillar of support. Xiao Hua, why did you come back? Li Zongbao's heart warmed, and he actually complained secretly. Big brother. Xiao Mao was also very surprised. Walk slowly, don't be anxious. Xiao Hua glanced at the somewhat messy karst cave and said coldly, Since this Xiao is here, all of you can leave. Don't worry, no one will be left behind. Yes. A few disciples who wanted to take advantage of the chaos to enter the passage immediately calmed down. You command here. Xiao Hua instructed Xiao Mao, whoever dares to act recklessly, directly kill them. Yes. Xiao Mao replied loudly. Fellow cultivators. You and the others slowly retreat. Don't mess up the formation. Xiao Hua saw that the situation was urgent and didn't say much. He slowly flew out of the karst cave and stood in midair like a proud god. His voice slowly rippled in the karst cave without any hint of panic. It was as if in Xiao Hua's eyes, these thousands of swordsmen were just dust. Yes, we understand. Nearly 3,000 disciples shouted in unison, and their morale immediately surged. Although Xiao Hua was only standing in mid-air and had only spoken a few words, his appearance was actually more powerful than any magic treasure or divine ability. Not only did the hearts of the Dao sect disciples stabilize, even the sword cultivators were somewhat afraid, and their momentum of attack actually slowed down. Chapter 25-34. A moment later, many cultivators slowly retreated, and there were fewer enemies in front of them. The sword cultivators clamored again. Seeing this, Xiao Hua slowly flew to the front of the cultivators. Junior brother Xiao. Li Zongbao called out worriedly. Senior brother Li, tell junior brother Jian and junior brother Yi to prepare to retreat. I'll be here to block them. Xiao Hua said confidently, however, quickly send a message to them. When I count to 5, immediately close your eyes and use your divine sense to retreat to the cave. Don't open your eyes and don't use your divine sense to look at me. Whoever dares to, don't kill them. Yes, I know. Li Zongbao was overjoyed. Knowing that Xiao Hua had another method, he hurriedly sent a message to Jian Boming and Yi Bei. Xiao Hua waved his hand, holding the wishful steel staff in his hand. He actually stood there and began to count. The sword cultivators were all stunned. They didn't know what Xiao Hua was doing. Several sword lights attacked Xiao Hua, but they were all easily defeated by Xiao Hua's wishful steel staff. When Xiao Hua counted to 5, all the Dao sect cultivators closed their eyes together and released their divine sense with great ease, retreating towards the cave. Xiao Hua pointed his finger, and a wave of Xiantian true water surged out like a blue wave, engulfing many of the sword cultivators closest to the cultivators. Moreover, the Xiantian true water separated the sword cultivators from the cultivators. I forgot. Xiao Hua suddenly realized. If I use this Xiantian true water, I'm afraid I can directly kill these sword cultivators. Why do I have to use so much strength to open the passage? Moreover, this Xiantian true water may also be able to eliminate the spirit binding juice? But then, the screams of the swordsmen could be heard. Hundreds of swordsmen lost their primordial spirits and fell from the sky like puppets. However, many of the other swordsmen had strong primordial spirits. They struggled to break free from the illusion and screamed in fear as they flew into the distance. Hee, the sword cultivators are all flying away. Who will I kill? Xiao Hua laughed. Moreover, I don't dare to use this true water casually. Who knows how to eliminate the spirit-binding juice? Of course, among the thousands of sword cultivators, there were still many sword cultivators with brilliant methods. They each used their secret techniques to resist the true water. At the same time, they used their flying swords to attack the true water, wanting to kill Xiao Hua after he exhausted his magic power. Unfortunately, they were wrong again. Xiao Hua's true water. Junior brother Xiao, how is it? Li Zongbao naturally did not dare to open his eyes, nor did he dare to use his divine sense to scan the area. When he saw that most of the cultivators in the karst cave were gone, he sent a voice transmission. Senior brother Li. If you want to wait, you can stay. Let's go out together. Xiao Hua indifferently replied. Good. Li Zongbao was very happy. He knew that he was right to call Xiao Hua over on a whim. After Li Zongbao urged Jian Boming, Yi Bei, and the others to leave, he called for Xiao Mao and Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua slowly withdrew the innate primordial water and looked at the dozen or so disciples of the 3 sects who stood there like puppets not far from him. He coldly smiled and said, in this world, there are always some people, who think that other people's words are all lies. Then, he ignored them and flew to the tunnel. Let's go. You and I are the last three. Xiao Hua said with a smile. Okay, Xiao Mao will go first. Xiao Hua will bring up the rear. Li Zongbao instructed. Xiao Mao didn't refuse. He flew into the tunnel and used his last bit of magic power to rush to the cave entrance. Xiao Hua waited for Li Zongbao to fly into the tunnel. He turned around and looked at the sword cultivators who also rushed into the cave. He stretched out his hand and curled his fingers, as if he was calling them over. Xiao Hua's action scared the sword cultivators into retreating a few steps. They waited until Xiao Hua's figure disappeared. Then, they gathered their courage and flew in. Everyone looked in disgust for a moment. Like the cultivators of the Dao sect, a portion of the disciples flew into the tunnel on their flying swords. The other disciples flew out of the cave. However, in just the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, within this passageway, there was a continuous rumbling sound of explosions. The fire talismans that Xiao Hua left in the passageway exploded one after another, killing all the swordsmen that were blocked by the restriction of the flowing ice valley within the passageway. Even the restriction of flowing ice valley and all the passageways above it were destroyed without a trace by the fire talisman. Above flowing ice valley, the thin crescent moon was like a willow eyebrow on a branch. It was indiscernible and boundless. It couldn't compare to the stars in the night sky. The rushing river water created waves. The sound of waves drifted endlessly in the valley. However, the noise of the night sky couldn't hide the slaughter in the mortal world. Countless screams, sounds of collisions, and the sound of the spiritual chi of heaven and earth exploding could be heard without end. At a mountain stream not far away from this massacre, under a protruding eagle-like beak, a series of black shadows suddenly rushed out. These black shadows seemed to be really intertwined with each other, but when these black shadows rushed into the air, they immediately fell on the protruding walls between the cliffs with a plop plop sound. These black shadows appeared in a flash. However, the falling black shadows were continuous. When the last thin and tall black shadow appeared in the air with two black shadows in his hands, there were actually over 100 black shadows that fell onto the cliffs. Ha ha ha. That thin and tall black shadow was Xiao Hua. He looked at Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao on his left and right and laughed. If it wasn't for this little brother having some strength, I'm afraid that senior brother Li would be the first cultivator to fall to his death. I'm afraid I won't fall to my death. I'll be crushed to death. It was rare for Li Zongbao to joke. It was actually quite amusing. That's right. Xiao Hua flew out from the passage. How could he have known that many cultivators who flew out from the passage already had no magic power left in their bodies? Even if they used flying techniques, they couldn't. Fortunately, Xiao Hua flew at the end and had enough strength. Only then was he able to push over 100 cultivators out. At this moment, behind Xiao Hua, there was a series of rumbling explosions. The entire mountain rock was shaking. Senior brother Li, fellow Taoists. Xiao Hua's divine sense swept out. He already knew that the cultivators who flew out earlier were either hiding nearby or flying out to meet the enemy. He immediately shouted, "This place was originally hidden." However, with so many disciples flying out earlier, I'm afraid it has already attracted the attention of sword cultivators. Moreover, I destroyed the passage and attracted the swordsmen. You all have already taken medicinal pills and your true essence has been regenerated. Don't wait any longer. Quickly leave Flowing Ice Valley. As for the next step, it won't be too late for us to discuss it later. All right. After flying out of the restriction, Li Zongbao also took medicinal pills in succession. Currently, true essence was slowly being regenerated in his meridians. It was naturally impossible for him to fight, but it was enough for him to fly. Quick, there are fleeing Dao sect cultivators here. Several hundred feet away, there was an extremely ear-piercing sword cry. Dozens of divine senses quickly swept over. Let's go. Li Zongbao struggled to fly into the air. With a wave of his hand, he determined the direction and flew in a certain direction. Jian Boming and Yi Bei also flew up. They each organized the disciples of their respective sects and flew behind Li Zongbao and the other two. Looking at the pitch-black night sky and sweeping it with his divine sense, Xiaohua didn't feel that there was anything special about the place Li Zongbao was heading to. However, when he thought about the strangeness of not meeting a second Dao sect disciple in the underground cave, Xiaohua didn't have any other thoughts. He would just follow Li Zongbao. Where do you think you're going? After flying for less than half an incense stick's worth of time, a sword cry soared into the sky from Xiaohua's right hand, followed by an angry roar that reverberated in the night sky. A beautiful sword light flickered, letting out a roar like a wild beast, the night wind, the sword cry, and soon after, a rumbling sound of thunder could be heard. Quick! Amidst the thunderous roar, there was a light shout. A rainbow was born from the opposite side of the sword light. In an instant, it seemed to have traversed hundreds of feet and rushed into the sword light. Crackle! Crackle! It sounded like beans being fried in a hot pan. At the same time, there was another deep voice. Beside the rainbow, thousands of golden threads streaked across the sky and rushed into the sword light. They let out an extremely sharp "cc" sound. Roar! The sword light let out a strange sword cry. It was like the cries of thousands of birds and the roars of hundreds of beasts. It covered the sound of the rainbow and the golden threads. Even the sword light, which was several hundred feet in size, suppressed the rainbow and the golden threads. Rumble. After the sword cry, there was the sound of the spiritual chi of heaven and earth exploding and colliding. The sound waves and air waves washed away the mountain rocks and the river water. Countless lights and shadows swayed and illuminated several hundred feet in the sky. After seeing the sword light, a tall swordsman wearing a red sword suit appeared. Who else could it be but Qin Jian, whose portrait was hung all over the Sky Patrol City? The figure behind the rainbow was a white-haired female cultivator wearing a Taoist robe from the Cool Breeze Valley. As for behind the golden threads, it was the cultivator from the Utopia faction, Chu Hui, whom Xiao Hua and the others were familiar with. However, when Xiao Hua and the others saw it, it was after the brilliance flashed. Two blood-curdling screams rang out at almost the same time. Hundreds of sword lights broke through the rainbow and golden threads, rapidly piercing through the bodies of the two people. The almost invisible protective golden light flickered, unable to block the sharp sword lights. After the sword lights pierced through their bodies, the two cultivators' corpses fell into the river water. Uncle Chu Hui. Li Zongbao's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Uncle Su Bo. Jian Boming also sighed. Let's go. Xiao Hua saw Qin Jian's divine thought sweep over here and was very anxious. He had already seen clearly that when the flying swords entered Su Bo and Chu Hui's bodies, the protective golden light didn't have much effect. He knew that their magic power hadn't recovered. They must have rushed out from the exit of the flowing ice valley. Their cultivation levels were not as high as Qin Jian's, so it wasn't strange that they both died. Qin Jian. Li Zongbao's eyes were red and his magic power was surging. He wanted to rush over. What's wrong with you? Xiao Hua saw this and pulled Li Zongbao back. He poured magic power into Li Zongbao's meridians and sealed Li Zongbao's true core strength. How can you be his opponent? Xiao Hua grabbed Li Zongbao and flew up. Chapter 25-35. Li Zongbao regained his composure. An indescribable expression flashed across his eyes. I know. I am not his opponent, but, Li Zongbao wanted to say that he had an uncontrollable urge to kill Qin Jian with his immortal piercing whip, but Xiao Hua said anxiously, but if you want to take revenge, you have to wait until the next opportunity. Although Xiao Mao also wanted to kill Qin Jian, he knew that he was not Qin Jian's opponent. Perhaps Qin Jian would not personally make a move, but they were not the opponents of the other swordsmen. Thus, he hurriedly activated his magic power and flew away with Xiao Hua and Li Zongbao. Who knew that Qin Jian's spiritual sense would detect the movements of Xiao Hua and the others? While the swordsmen were chasing after them, he also stepped on his flying sword and easily chased after them. This is bad. Xiao Hua frowned. If it was a normal day, he might not be afraid of Qin Jian. However, he only had less than 50% of his magic power left. How could he fight with Qin Jian? But looking at the thousands of cultivators, they were really like monkeys fleeing from a tree. They were all panicking, and their faces were filled with extreme fear. Qin Jian's reputation was really like the sun in the sky. After today, it would be even more resounding. At this time, perhaps only I can fight. Xiao Hua slowly stopped and coldly turned around. He did not even take out his magic treasures like the wishful staff. He just stood in the air with his hands behind his back. Big brother Xiao Mao was shocked and was about to shout. Li Zongbao also stopped. You all quickly leave. Xiao Hua said coldly, don't turn back. If possible, don't let these cultivators talk. Are you confident? Li Zongbao's eyes narrowed as he only asked one question. Yes. Xiao Hua replied, you all settle these cultivators down and quickly return. Okay, don't worry big brother. Xiao Mao said anxiously, as long as we settle them down, immediately, they naturally have their own places to go. Why do they need me to settle them down? Li Zongbao laughed and took out his immortal piercing whip. Xiao Mao came to his senses and smiled, that's right, big brother. This time, you can't get rid of us. And that's good too. Xiao Hua looked at Qin Jian and the swordsman chasing after Qin Jian. He waved his hand and said, come with me. After saying that, Xiao Hua brought Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao and flew in another direction. The disciples of the Utopia faction, the Changbai sect, and the Cool Breeze Valley were led by Jian Boming, Yi Bei, and the others to fly away under Li Zongbao's orders. Qin Jian was not an idiot. When he saw that the three of them had separated, he knew that it was a trap. He waved his hand and ordered the swordsman to chase after them while he continued to chase after the disciples of the three sects. Qin Jian, do you want to know where Ling Yunwu is? Seeing this, Xiao Hua waved his hand to signal Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao to leave first, while he himself stopped and stood quietly in midair as he spoke indifferently via voice transmission. Ling Yunwu? Qin Jian frowned slightly. When he saw Xiao Hua's Imperial Thunder Sect's Daoist robe, he suddenly realized something and said in shock, you're the horrifying phoenix. That's right, Qin Jian. You actually know me. I've been chasing after you for a long time. I didn't expect to meet you here. Xiao Hua's body was surrounded by a hurricane, and countless spiritual qi of heaven and earth gathered around him. He looked extremely arrogant. Ha ha ha, you're actually the horrifying phoenix. Qin Jian saw that Xiao Hua's appearance was similar to the one in the voice transmission and that he was in the middle stage of the Foundation establishment stage. He had already thrown the thousands of disciples of the three sects aside and waved his hand to signal his disciples to chase after Xiao Hua. At the same time, he stopped and flew toward Xiao Hua. I really didn't expect this. I just casually tampered with the flowing ice valley and wanted to kill a few cultivators in the early stage of the golden core stage to satisfy my craving. I didn't expect that the famous horrifying phoenix would be attracted here. Qin Jian was really happy. He knew that killing Xiao Hua was much better than killing thousands of cultivators. These thousands of cultivators were saved by you alone, right? Qin Jian looked at Xiao Hua, who was standing quietly, and then looked at the Foundation establishment stage cultivators who were fleeing in the distance. He asked with interest, I didn't expect that you, a Foundation establishment stage cultivator, could actually do something that even Golden Core stage cultivators couldn't do. Just now, the two Golden Core stage cultivators from the Utmost Happiness faction and Cool Breeze Valley rushed out of the Spirit Stone mine with their lives on the line. They only had 1,000 people with them. You saved more than 6,000 people in one go. You really live up to your reputation. You flatter me. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and smiled, this little one's reputation is really nothing. Compared to Brother Qin, I'm still far behind. Brother Qin must have been in charge of this flowing ice valley for many years, right? This scheme really opened the eyes of this Xiao. It scared this Xiao so much that this Xiao's heart is beating wildly. This is nothing. Qin Jian laughed when he heard this. He carefully flew closer to Xiao Hua and said, however, to be praised by the terrifying phoenix, this old man is also very happy. Of course, today can't be considered perfect. I only killed 3 golden core stage cultivators and more than 10,000 foundation establishment stage cultivators. If I can take the terrifying phoenix's head and kill the 6,000 cultivators, then it can be considered perfect. That's right, that's right. Xiao Hua also clapped his hands and said, this little one only saved 6,000 cultivators and killed Qin Mu Ming and Liang Qi. If I can kill brother Qin, then today can be considered perfect. Great minds think alike. Qin Jian also clapped his hands and said, I didn't expect the terrifying phoenix to have such lofty ambitions at such a young age. She's only in the foundation establishment stage. This old man really admires the new generation. I wouldn't dare. The new generation in Flowing Ice Valley pushes the old one, and the old one dies on the beach. Brother Qin, why don't you be the old one? Xiao Hua said with a smile. What? Qin Jian's words were also followed by Xiao Hua's sarcastic retort, which was out of his expectations. When he understood, he almost held his stomach and laughed. Terrifying phoenix, terrifying phoenix. You're really terrifying, extremely terrifying. Qin Jian laughed until he was rocking back and forth. Seeing Xiao Hua rubbing his nose and enjoying himself, he sneered and said, Xiao Hua. You've been talking for so long. Has the spirit-binding juice in your body been removed? Has your true essence recovered? Oh. So brother Qin saw through it long ago? Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. The heaven and earth spirit chi around him swarmed into his body. How could others not see through it? You just came out from the array I set up. How could I not know? But you're different from those 2 bullshit golden core stage cultivators. Qin Jian straightened his back in an instant. You're the opponent I've admired for a long time. Ling Yunwu died in your hands, Yu Ming went crazy because of you, and Zhong Haoshuan also died in your hands. If I can't have a fair fight with you, how can I be at ease? Damn it, you should have said so earlier. Hearing this, Xiao Hua sat down cross-legged. With a wave of his hand, several pills entered his mouth. He actually closed his eyes and adjusted his breathing. You. Seeing Xiao Hua like this, Qin Jian was stunned again. Which cultivator dared to do this when fighting with him? However, his eyes flashed with a trace of fierceness. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly. He actually didn't make a sound and really waited in the air. Wrong, definitely wrong. Although Xiao Hua sat down cross-legged casually, how could he peacefully cultivate in front of the infamous Qin Jian? How could he treat his words as true? This doesn't make sense. Qin Jian was able to kill thousands of foundation establishment stage cultivators and even boasted that he was stronger than Tu Hong. How could he be so righteous? However, no matter if it was a Dao sect cultivator or a sword cultivator swordsman, they were both wretched and righteous people. Not to mention Immortal Bright Sword and Li Xiubai, the closest ones were Ji Yi and Li Zongbao. They were both upright people. However, even if Qin Jian wasn't as vicious and merciless as Tu Hong, he definitely wasn't a kind person. Based on how Qin Jian cleanly killed Xia Hui and Su Bo, Xiao Hua knew that dealing with Qin Jian was different from dealing with Ji Yi. But, what plans does Qin Jian have? Xiao Hua was bewildered. While exercising the heaven-human body bestowment technique and the cultivation technique he was practicing, he tried his best to refine the pills and absorb the natural energies to restore his magic power. At the same time, he unleashed his Buddhist consciousness and scanned the area several hundred feet around him. It is impossible for Qin Jian to give me the time to recover. So, why did he tell me so much? I want to recover my vital energy. What does he want to recover? Could it be that he used up a huge amount of vital energy to kill those 2 golden core stage cultivators? After another half a cup of tea's time, Xiaohua's heart was even more shocked. It was indescribably strange. What was even stranger was that Qin Jian really stood with his hands behind his back and looked at him with a smile. Suddenly, a face flashed in Xiaohua's heart. A pretty face. It was that female sword cultivator called Guyu. Formless sword. Xiaohua's heart jumped and he almost shouted out. Guyu. I'm afraid she's Qin Jian's nephew. Thinking of this, Xiaohua slightly opened his hand and opened his delirium breaker Dharma eye. He carefully examined his surroundings. However, within several feet of him, there was only the usual brilliance of heaven and earth spiritual qi. There was only a slightly rich blue brilliance. Strange. Could it be that I'm judging a gentleman with my own mean heart? Xiaohua secretly muttered. Just as he was about to close his Dharma eye, an indescribable sharpness came from his body. Instantly, goosebumps appeared all over his body. Xiaohua's eyes turned. His delusion breaker Dharma eye was still open. He looked around, but his body moved a little. He smiled and said, Brother Qin is indeed benevolent. This is far from the heartless and unscrupulous people in the rumors. As he said that, his other hand took out a few more pills and put them into his mouth. Hee, can rumors be trusted? Qin Jian's smile did not change. He said, the rumors say that the terrifying phoenix is a person with a phoenix dharma body. He's several feet tall and has a bloody mouth. He's also good at lightning escape and controlling lightning. But little friend? He seems to be too weak to even stand a gust of wind. Oh, that's right. Little friend is in the late stage of foundation establishment. This pill is too fierce. Don't be anxious. Don't be anxious. This old man has plenty of time to wait for you. Cough cough, Xiaohua seemed to be choked by the cold wind. His body trembled rapidly. After a moment, he sighed and said, this little one is so handsome. To think that the rumors say that I'm like that. This little one is really disappointed. Chapter 25-36. As he spoke, a hint of coldness flashed through Xiaohua's eyes. Just now, he clearly saw that in the instant his body moved, all the lights within 100 feet to the left were the same as before. Then, a few feet above his head, a faintly discernible golden thread suddenly stopped. It really is the invisible sword. And, it's actually moving so slowly from 100 feet away. Xiaohua sighed in his heart. Qin Jian is an illusory swordsman, but he's actually so guarded against me. I can only say that he's a scheming person. Of course, if not for my reputation, he wouldn't be so cautious. However, it's also strange. I've clearly been hit by the spirit binding juice and my magic power is greatly depleted. Why didn't he directly attack? Why did he use such a sinister method, to act in secret? Isn't this giving me a chance to catch my breath? Xiaohua really didn't understand. Unfortunately, he didn't know that those who were used to scheming would treat scheming as their everything. Qin Jian was famous for his ambushes during the Sword Dao War and was proud of it. He didn't dare to say that this was his only method, but once he made a move, the first thing he would think of was how to set up an ambush. This was already a habit. Moreover, Xiaohua's reputation was really resounding among sword cultivators. Ling Yunwu, Yu Ming, Zhong Haoshuan and the others might not be comparable to Qin Jian, but they were also illusory swordsmen. Qin Jian was still quite afraid of Xiaohua. Besides, Xiaohua actually saved nearly 7,000 cultivators and opened up the spirit stone mine in Flowing Ice Valley. How could the spirit binding juice be effective? Qin Jian was almost certain that Xiaohua's weak appearance was for him to see. It was a trap set up for him, waiting for him to fall for it. Since that was the case, Qin Jian naturally had to use his most proficient invisible golden thread sword as a method to kill Xiaohua. According to Qin Jian's thoughts, even a nascent soul cultivator wouldn't be able to easily detect this invisible sword. Unfortunately, not only did Xiaohua encounter Guyu before, he also had the delusion breaker Dharma eye and the hand of karma. Qin Jian's most prideful technique was extremely clumsy in the eyes of Xiaohua. Furthermore, Xiaohua even took the opportunity to consume a pill to recover his mana. After a short moment, Xiaohua moved again. Sure enough, that strand of golden thread stopped again. Cough, cough. Xiaohua used his hand to cover his mouth and laughed bitterly. Brother Qin's spirit-binding juice is truly formidable. I've rested for so long, yet I still haven't completely recovered. Thank you for your righteousness, Brother Qin, for allowing me to have time to consume medicinal pills. Hee, if that's the case, please don't show any mercy when you attack later. This is a fair fight between us. Even if I die, I will die honorably. Qin Jian said righteously. Cough cough, since Brother Qin has said so, this little one really can't bear to do it. Xiaohua was a bit embarrassed, and as the two of them were talking, the golden thread slowly approached again. Seeing that Xiaohua didn't speak, the golden thread stopped again, as if it was trying to guess whether Xiaohua was paying attention. Seeing that Xiaohua didn't pay attention, it slowly moved again. However, Xiaohua's casual movement, even if it was a tremble of his shoulder or a twitch of his finger, that golden thread would stop. Only when Xiaohua didn't make any further movements would it slowly descend. Therefore, after the time it took to eat a meal, that invisible sword of golden thread was only a few feet away from Xiaohua's head. Seeing that Qin Jian was so cautious, Xiaohua almost laughed involuntarily. Suddenly, he thought of fishing. It was as if the golden thread above his head was the hook, and he was the big fish. The hook was trying to approach him, afraid that it would disturb him, and as the fisherman, Qin Jian, had an expression as if a mountain was pressing down on him. However, from Xiaohua's point of view, it was as if he was the fisherman, and Qin Jian had become the big fish. Yes, fish or human or butterfly, who could say for sure? Seeing that the golden thread was already 2 feet away, the golden thread suddenly accelerated, preparing to pierce Xiaohua's head with lightning speed. At this time, Xiaohua suddenly moved again, and said with a smile, "This little one forgot to say something." When Xiaohua moved, Qin Jian habitually paused, and the golden thread stopped in midair. Qin Jian asked, "Little friend, what do you want to say?" Xiaohua laughed heartily, and his left hand covered his head with his robe. He suddenly used the heaven and earth in the sleeve technique and said, "Ha ha ha, this little one forgot to say thank you." Ah. When Qin Jian saw that Xiaohua actually covered his head with his robe, he knew that the situation was not good. However, his sword technique had just been used, and the invisible golden thread sword was in a state where it could not be released, so it was impossible for him to control the flying sword as he wished. Moreover, Xiaohua wanted him to be in this critical state. The transcendence energy in his body was suddenly sent out, and in an instant, the invisible golden thread sword was covered in his robe, cutting off the connection between Qin Jian and the invisible sword. Without waiting for Qin Jian to activate his sword origin, the invisible sword was sent into Xiaohua's space. After all, the invisible sword was only invisible on the surface, and Qin Jian had not cultivated it to the level of drawing it into the void. Xiaohua's heaven and earth in the sleeve technique caught him off guard. Even Daoist Jing Si's natal magic weapon was taken away by Xiaohua, so how could Qin Jian's invisible sword escape from Xiaohua's evil clutches? You! Qin Jian was so angry that his arms were trembling. You're going too far. He was truly speechless. He was truly infuriated. He had schemed for so long and wasted so much time and effort, but in the end, it was all for Xiaohua. Although he didn't know how Xiaohua discovered his invisible sword, and how he could accurately take it away, did he even need to ask? Qin Jian waved his hand without saying anything, and a ray of sword light shot out from his hand. Roar! A sharp wolf's howl shook the surroundings, like a hungry wolf howling at the bright moon on a full moon night. Ah! Qin Jian's sword intent is actually. Seeing an extremely ferocious wolf's head gradually appear in the sword light, and that bloody and murderous intent passed through the wolf's head and covered the area around Xiaohua, Xiaohua was stunned. He had participated in the battle of Dao cultivators for a long time, and had seen many sword cultivators' sword intent, such as plum blossoms, flowing water, tall mountains, and so on. However, this was the first time he saw a wolf's head. Seeing the wolf's head, Xiaohua suddenly thought of Daoist Bright Sword's little deer. Damn it, Qin Jian's sword intent is so ferocious, it can't be stronger than Daoist Bright Sword, right? The wolf's head flashed, and the ferocious sword intent passed through space and firmly enveloped Xiaohua. That sword intent stirred up the ferocity in Xiaohua's heart, and waves of murderous intent repeatedly attacked Xiaohua's mind. Moreover, Xiaohua's blood vessels expanded, and the blood essence in his entire body surged, as if it was about to burst out of his body. Hiss! Xiaohua sucked in a breath of cold air. Qin Jian's sword intent is murderous, ferocious, and the wolf's head directly targets one's heart. This murderous intent is only an external cause, but it can actually lure out the murderous intent in this young master's heart. Qin Jian's ability is indeed superhuman. Murderous intent is human nature. Although Xiaohua could silently guard his heart and act according to the Tao of heaven, it did not mean that there was no murderous intent in his heart. The Tao cultivator battle had been going on for close to 10 years, and the number of swordsmen and cultivators who coveted Xiaohua was truly innumerable. The murderous intent in his heart had long reached the heavens. Now, Qin Jian's ferocious wolf's sword intent had instantly ignited the desire in his heart. Although he knew that it was inappropriate, and already knew the intention of Qin Jian's wolf's head sword intent, it was still hard to suppress the impulse, and immediately ignited his ambition or murderous intent. Come, it's just a wolf's head sword intent. Do you think this young master is afraid of you? Xiaohua laughed wildly, and with a wave of his hand, the seal of the overturning sea appeared in midair. The magic power in his body surged, and a dragon's roar resounded, even more ferocious than the wolf's head. Roar! With a roar, an earthen yellow dragon's shape rapidly swam in midair. With the seal in its mouth, it pounced towards the enormous sword light of the wolf's head. The seal of the overturning sea was so huge. Although the wolf's head had already expanded to several dozen zhang, it was still suppressed by the seal into a kind of flat sword light. There was even a large depression in front of the wolf's head, and the sword light inside was faintly flickering, as if it was about to be extinguished. Seal of the overturning sea? Although Qin Jian already had a high opinion of Xiaohua, when he saw the seal of the overturning sea, his expression still changed. Ji also died in your hands? Ha, Ji is not the first, and you will not be the last. Xiaohua's voice was filled with wildness. The magic power in his body surged out, and the yellow dragon rushed to the front of the wolf's head, and spat out the seal like a pearl. Wang, with a sharp sound, the seal of the overturning sea once again expanded. The light around it suddenly retracted, forming a black hole. The space around the black hole was slightly distorted, and the entire black hole was pressing down on the enormous wolf's head. Roar! The wolf's head that was formed by thousands of sword lights let out a sorrowful cry. All of the sword lights were like fireflies at the end of autumn, and were instantly extinguished. Nascent soul. His strength is actually close to that of a nascent soul. Qin Jian couldn't help but groan when he saw that the seal of overturning the sea had released such a powerful aura even before it collided with the sword light. He was secretly astonished. However, this situation was also extremely normal. If Xiaohua didn't have such strength, how could he have killed so many illusory swordsmen? However, Qin Jian's eyes were also very bright. The sword energy in his body surged, and he waved his hands, open. Rumble, with a loud sound that shook the earth, the seal of the overturning sea collided with the thousands of sword lights, and directly scattered the wolf's head. Moreover, the wolf's head was pushed back dozens of feet before it finally stopped. This collision created a hurricane that not only completely disrupted the spiritual energy in the air, but also lifted the water in the flowing ice valley into the air. Satisfying. Xiaohua's eyes were slightly red. He was extremely satisfied with the effects of the seal of the overturning sea. Similarly, he waved his hands and shouted. The yellow dragon once again swam in the air, and the seal of the overturning sea also emitted an intense yellow light, and fell into the yellow dragon's mouth. Wang wang wang, just as the seal of the overturning sea was crazily absorbing the spiritual energy in the air, a ray of sword light suddenly appeared in the void where the light was extinguished. That sword light was like breathing, and it gradually grew stronger as Qin Jian activated the sword technique in his hand. After a while, that sword light was like a candle that lit up the space. The sword lights that were extinguished just now lit up one by one, and the light even spread, gradually forming a fierce wolf that was comparable to the yellow dragon. Chapter 25:37. Attack. Xiao Hua waved his hand. Without waiting for Qin Jian's sword intent to form, the yellow dragon on the seal of the ocean pushed the seal towards the wolf's sword intent, just like how it opened up the passage before. Roar. Qin Jian's face became serious. He hurriedly urged his sword technique. The wolf roared and actually opened its mouth, swallowing the seal of the ocean into its stomach. Seeing the seal of the ocean and the yellow dragon disappear, a powerful sealing power came from the wolf's sword light, as if it wanted to cut off its connection with the seal of the ocean. Xiao Hua smiled coldly. The spell in his hand changed again. A strong ray of light came out from the wolf's stomach like a needle. Then, thousands of rays of light shot out from different parts of the wolf's sword light. With a loud boom, the sword light that transformed into a huge wolf was completely suppressed by the light of the seal of the ocean. It was torn into pieces by the light of the seal of the ocean. Ha ha ha, Xiao Hua laughed proudly. Qin Jian, you're only a so-so. Even if you have such a fierce sword intent, what's the use of it against me? Looking at Xiao Hua's appearance, he seemed to have forgotten about his lack of true essence earlier. He didn't even care about the magic power he was using to urge the seal of the ocean with all his strength. He didn't even care about the lack of true essence in his meridians. Seeing Xiao Hua being so arrogant, Qin Jian's expression changed. Xiao Hua was using true essence, and he was also using sword essence. He really couldn't figure out how much true essence Xiao Hua had in his body. He also couldn't figure out whether Xiao Hua was a golden core or foundation establishment. Go! Qin Jian shouted. The sword light started to gather again. That terrifying wolf had appeared again. You think I'm afraid of you? Xiao Hua smiled coldly. His magic power surged. The seal of the ocean turned into a dragon again and again. Rumbling sounds echoed in the air of flowing ice valley. In the distance, Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao stood in the air. Even though no sword cultivator came to chase after them, their hearts were clenched together. However, their clenched hearts were also incomparably shocked. An indescribable feeling spread in their hearts. Today, they had seen Xiao Hua's true strength. It was definitely a strength that overturned their original understanding. Not to mention themselves, even if they were masters, how could they reach such heights? Li Zongbao's heart was filled with bitterness. He had already overestimated Xiao Hua's cultivation, but now it seemed that what he overestimated was only the tip of the iceberg. What he knew was nothing more than a tree in the forest. Other than being shocked, Xiao Mao was also envious and longing. He was deeply aware of the power of the dragon transformation art, but he never thought that the dragon transformation art would have such an effect. When he first met Xiao Hua, he was disdainful of Xiao Hua, but now, Xiao Hua's height was something he could only look up to. However, he remembered that he also had the dragonization ability, which meant that he also had a path forward. Xiao Mao was extremely eager to learn it, and he might be able to reach that level in the near future. This is for sure. Xiao Mao's eyes flashed with determination. Xiao Hua's encouragement to him was far more than any encouragement in the world. All of his master's methods were also insignificant in his eyes. He knew that as long as he relied on the dragon transformation art, he would definitely be able to condense a core in the future, or even conceive a baby. However, the two of them turned their heads almost at the same time and exchanged glances. They seemed to have realized something. Xiao Hua had always been concealing his strength. Even when he met a strong enemy, he would hide some of his cultivation. When had he ever tried to be brave like today? Could it be that his spiritual power wasn't affected by the spirit binding juice at all just now? Could it be that his spiritual power is so abundant that it can be compared to a nascent soul cultivator? The moment the two of them looked at each other, they saw a trace of doubt in each other's eyes. Qin Jian's scheme. The two of them exclaimed at the same time. Li Zongbao hurriedly shouted, "Junior brother Xiao, let's send a message quickly." At this time, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth on the battlefield was in chaos. Qi waves and shock waves spread out. Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao knew that they couldn't get close, but they were also afraid of disturbing Xiao Hua's attention, so they could only do this. However, no matter how they sent a message, Xiao Hua didn't respond. It was as if Xiao Hua turned a deaf ear to everything outside the battlefield. This is not normal. Li Zongbao immediately came to a conclusion. He raised the immortal piercing whip and said anxiously, "Junior brother Xiao, wait a moment. I'll go over now." "I'll go over too." Xiao Mao was naturally very anxious. The two of them had already thrown caution to the wind. Why would they care about their own lives? However, at this time, the situation on the battlefield changed again. After more than 10 collisions, the huge wolf shape had already dimmed. It was like a candle in the wind that could be extinguished with just one more breath. Xiao Hua's heart was filled with ecstasy. He urged his true essence and his magic power surged into the spell that was gradually forming at his fingertips. However, at this moment, Xiao Hua's meridians trembled and signs of his true essence drying up flashed by. If it was normal, Xiao Hua would have been alert. However, at this time, Xiao Hua's eyes were bloodshot. He only wanted to tear Qin Jian's head off. Why would he care about such minor details? He waved his hand and a few more elixirs were sent into his mouth. He shouted, "Come, come, come. I'll let you have a taste of my power." Then, the medicinal power of the elixirs was quickly refined. His spiritual power surged like waves. Just as Xiao Hua's spell was sent into the seal of Overturn the Sea, 2 rays of light flew out from Xiao Hua's left and right. One was the shadow of Li Zongbao's immortal piercing whip, and the other was Xiao Mao's universe ring. They turned into flowing light and rushed into the battlefield. Boom, boom. Although Xiao Hua's seal of Overturn the Sea and Qin Jian's flying sword did not collide directly with the two's magical treasures, the two of them had fought for a long time. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth nearby was completely disturbed. Not only was the sword light overflowing, but the light and power of the seal of Overturn the Sea were also nearby and did not dissipate. Although the two magical treasures were used by Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao, when they collided with the light of the seal of Overturn the Sea and Qin Jian's sword light, they could only let out a roar. The two magical treasures were sent flying. At the same time, their primordial spirits were also heavily injured. They could not help but fly backwards for more than 10 feet. Pu. 2 mouthfuls of blood essence were spat out from their mouths at almost the same time. The two of them were originally injured in the karst cave. Their spiritual power was exhausted. Now that they had just recovered a little, how could they be a match for the two of them? However, even though the two of them were dispirited in mid-air and barely managed to stabilize their bodies, they still had some gains. After all, they had 2 magical treasures as an external cause. Xiao Hua was slightly shocked. The spiritual sense that he had left behind on the battlefield hurriedly swept outwards. When he saw the injuries of the two of them, he was slightly shocked. However, it was only a shock. The killing intent in his heart surged up again, almost unstoppable. Killing. Xiao Hua's heart suddenly had a kind of enlightenment. Everyone has killing intent in their hearts. Everyone has darkness. It's just that this darkness has always been covered by light and cannot be discovered. Even though this young master feels that he is extremely open and aboveboard, this young master is not an immortal, but only an immortal cultivator. This darkness is far from being removed. Now that there is an opportunity, a reason to trigger this darkness can't be suppressed. However, even though Xiao Hua knew, even though he felt that this kind of unrestrained killing was indeed refreshing, but what was the end of the refreshing feeling, he was not clear in his heart. However, he was clear in his heart that this pleasure of killing was provoked by Qin Jian. He had already unknowingly fallen into Qin Jian's scheme. Falling into the opponent's scheme, could the ending be a rise in cultivation? Could it be a safe escape? Xiao Hua hurriedly tried to think of a way to save Qin Jian. He wanted to calm himself down, but that uncontrollable impulse kept attacking him, making him unable to control his true essence. His magic power surged out again, and the seal of ocean overturning roared as it rushed towards Qin Jian's sword light. Why can't I control myself? Xiao Hua was aghast and began to form hand seals again. Not good, spirit binding juice. Spirit binding juice. Xiao Hua suddenly had a thought in his mind. In the jade pendant, it mentioned the after effects of the spirit binding juice, but it was not clear what it was. Could it be? This is the after effects of the spirit binding juice? Immediately, Xiao Hua's divine sense swept across the calm Qin Jian in the distance, only to see the corner of Qin Jian's mouth slightly raised. He actually looked like he had a card up his sleeve. Damn it. Why does this young master have the after effects of the spirit binding juice? Why don't Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao have any after effects? Xiao Hua was secretly surprised, but in a moment, he gave the answer himself. Nonsense, the two of them just fought in the underground cave for a long time. Even if there were any after effects, it would have long been gone. This young master. Alas. What should I do? Xiao Hua naturally did not know that when Li Zongbao saw his martial uncle being killed by Qin Jian, the killing intent in his heart also went out of control. If not for the fact that he had already killed many sword cultivators in the cave and was firmly restrained by Xiao Hua, he might also be in some danger. Xiao Hua's spiritual power uncontrollably flowed into the seal of tumbling ocean. The seal of tumbling ocean overflowed with brilliance, the yellow dragon stirred the air, and it was full of yellow shadows, completely suppressing Qin Jian's sword light. Xiao Hua seemed to be winning, but Xiao Hua understood that he was only looking good on the surface, completely relying on the support of the elixir. He was falling step by step into the grave that Qin Jian had dug for him. Roar! Qin Jian's giant wolf took shape again, roaring towards the sky. Not only did it absorb the surrounding spiritual energy, it also awakened the last trace of killing intent in Xiao Hua's heart. Kill! Xiao Hua's eyes were also completely red. The seal of tumbling ocean smashed towards the giant wolf. At this moment, the giant wolf was vivid and lifelike. The sword light in its eyes revealed a kind of cunning and cruelty. It was reflected in Xiao Hua's eyes, and also penetrated into Xiao Hua's heart. Seeing such a vivid beast's nature, Xiao Hua could not help but think of Reverend Bright Sword's little deer sword intent. Like a flash of lightning, Xiao Hua's mind entered the space without hesitation. With a wave of his hand, Reverend Bright Sword's flying sword appeared in his hand. Immediately, a cool feeling from Reverend Bright Sword's flying sword entered his hand, and this cool feeling slowly but clearly rushed into his heart meridian, rushing into his body. This cool feeling was like the little deer nimbly jumping over the stream, jumping over the grass, and hiding in the cave. Chapter 25:38. This coolness was like a drizzle, drenching Xiao Hua's body in the scorching heat. All of his impatience, all of his killing intent, all of his boiling blood gradually calmed down. See, Xiao Hua was awake. Or rather, he was awake just now, but he was unable to control himself. At this moment, his control over his body and meridians were gradually recovering. A faint soreness came from his meridians. Humph! Xiao Hua let out a cold snort after some lingering fear. His meridians had been ravaged by black sand and countless spirit herbs. At the same time, he had the support of the dragon transformation art. Qin Jian's scheme was to trap him, but if he succeeded, it would not be so simple. Of course, even if Qin Jian did not succeed, what would Xiao Hua be like at that time? Thinking about it, Xiao Hua felt some lingering fear. At any time, he could not underestimate his opponent, and he could not let his guard down. Seeing Xiao Hua suddenly retract his magic power and the seal of the overturning sea only hovered in the air, Qin Jian was a little surprised. However, he still urged the giant wolf to pounce on Xiao Hua. Why use a sledgehammer to kill a chicken? Xiao Hua sneered and pointed his finger. The yellow dragon of the seal of the overturning sea landed on the seal. The seal suddenly expanded and smashed towards the giant wolf. The sound was still earth-shattering. Although the giant wolf was not completely torn apart like before, it was still scattered. Flying sword? Seeing that Xiao Hua's defense was no longer as crazy as before, Qin Jian felt that it was a pity. He thought that the effect of the spirit-binding juice had worn off. However, when he saw the flying sword in Xiao Hua's hand, he was puzzled. At this moment, the flying sword in Xiao Hua's hand flashed with a faint light. The little deer slowly walked out from the light. The little deer also emitted a faint sword light. Although the sword light was faint, it was extremely sharp. Every time the little deer took a step, the sword light would expand by 1 zhang. When the little deer walked into the air, its small head slightly raised, and it even sneezed. The sword light immediately enveloped an area of several zhang around it. Like sunlight piercing through the darkness, the little deer's quiet sword light pierced through the giant wolf's brutal sword intent without any obstruction. All of the killing and savagery were annihilated by the faint sword light. Sword intent? Deer. Tranquil deer? Qin Jian was dumbfounded. Why does this guy have the sword spirit of a swordsman? Where did he get it? And this sword intent is so complete, so supreme. Qin Jian was almost jealous of Xiao Hua. Great. Using stillness to overcome hardness with softness. When Xiao Hua saw this scene, he sighed with emotion. His heart was incomparably calm, as though he had received a baptism. That little deer looked so weak, yet so agile. However, this pure feeling was precisely the nemesis of Qin Sword's giant wolf, completely suppressing it. Perhaps, it's because of Reverend Bright Sword's high cultivation? Xiao Hua attempted to use the flying sword to attack the Qin sword with the young deer. Unfortunately, the young deer only stayed in midair for a moment before barking at Xiao Hua. It flashed again and entered the long sword. Seeing that the little deer wasn't under his command, Xiao Hua felt helpless. He stored the sword into his space and used his divine sense to scan Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao, who had fallen at the foot of the mountain in the distance. After confirming that the two were fine, he withdrew his divine sense. "Ha, Qin Jian, you old fogey." Xiao Hua laughed. "This young master's luck is at its peak. Your thousands of schemes will only be for naught. Hand over your head. There's no need to keep the bounty of my Sky Patrol City anymore." "Ignorant child." Qin Jian sneered. "Even if this old man's scheme fails, how much true yuan do you have in your body? You don't even have a golden core. Why should this old man be afraid of you?" As he spoke, Qin Jian waved his hand. The sword light that was scattered in midair gradually condensed into a pitch-black flying sword. That flying sword was extremely bloody. "Go!" Qin Jian let out a soft roar. The flying sword rushed into the air and suddenly split into two. There seemed to be a mysterious connection between the two flying swords. One flying sword drove the other flying sword, and the other flying sword drove the other flying sword. Flying swords were originally extremely fast, and in this way, the two flying swords streaked across the sky like shooting stars chasing after the moon, piercing towards Xiao Hua's ribs from two sides with incomparable speed. "Io, this young master understands." Xiao Hua saw that the two flying swords were piercing towards him at a breakneck speed. Instead of being shocked, he was delighted. It was as though he had discovered something that he had never discovered before. "Pooh!" Xiao Hua opened his mouth and a green and red flying sword flew out. It was Zhu Meng. Zhu Meng flew out and similarly split into two, like two stars rushing towards Qin Jian's flying sword. You still have a flying sword?" Qin Jian was completely stunned. When he saw Xiao Hua take out a long sword with sword intent, he was already surprised. However, when Xiao Hua was unable to control it, he was relieved. He knew that Xiao Hua did not know anything about flying swords. However, now that he saw Xiao Hua easily controlling a flying sword and splitting it into two like him, how could he not be shocked? However, Qin Jian sneered. You're just using your spiritual sense to control a sword. How can you be a match for me, a sword cultivator? Kill. As Qin Jian activated his sword energy, the flying sword suddenly accelerated. Xiao Hua's flying sword was not slow, but it still managed to block the two flying swords. Bang! Two crisp sounds rang out. Qin Jian's flying sword knocked Zhu Meng away. Zhu Meng did not seem to be a match for him at all. The quality of this flying sword is better than this old man's flying sword? Seeing that Zhu Meng was knocked away but his flying sword was still intact, Qin Jian was delighted. On the other hand, Xiao Hua sighed and secretly said, alas, as expected. My flying sword can't be called a flying sword. Perhaps it can be compared to a drawing sword swordsman, but in the eyes of a real illusory sword, it is child's play. Give me your life. Qin Jian laughed sinisterly. He knew the power of his flying sword. Not to mention Xiao Hua, who was only a foundation establishment cultivator, even golden core cultivators like Xie Hui and Su Bo could not block the sharpness of his flying sword. Furthermore, Qin Jian sent out two sword lights. Even if Xiao Hua's escape technique was fast, he would not be able to dodge. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua didn't seem to be flustered as the two sword lights flew about 3 meters away from him. He casually waved his hand, as if he was taking something out of his storage pouch. A pitch-black magic staff appeared in his hand. With 2 swings of the staff, he effortlessly struck the flying swords. Bang! The flying sword shrank, as if it was damaged. What? There's still a magic weapon? Just like all the swordsmen and cultivators that were killed by Xiao Hua, Qin Jian could not help but ask as Xiao Hua's bottom line was revealed. So what if there's a magic weapon? This old man will let you die of exhaustion in the sword array. Qin Jian sneered and opened his mouth. Pu. With 2 consecutive sounds, 2 sword lights rushed into the night sky and landed on both sides of Xiao Hua like lightning. Together with the previous 2 sword lights, Xiao Hua was firmly trapped in the middle. A powerful restrictive force was emitted from the 4 sword lights and revolved around Xiao Hua in a mysterious trajectory. The force was like a whirlpool in the sea, but also like a whirlpool in a hurricane. It firmly controlled Xiao Hua's body. Not only did the true essence in Xiao Hua's body slowly condense, even the blood in his veins showed signs of stagnation. Oh. This is a sword array. Xiao Hua originally wanted to struggle, but when he saw that Qin Jian actually used the 4 flying swords to form a sword array, he could not help but feel happy. He also had a sword array, for example, the Sword of the World, which seemed to be a sword array. As for the Great 7 Stars array, he could only control it through the sword pouch. He could only drive the sword array to display a restrictive force, but he was still unable to display this kind of force similar to a whirlpool. He was somewhat curious about the sword array that Qin Jian used the 4 sword lights. After the 4 flying swords trapped Xiao Hua, the cautious Qin Jian began to approach. The 4 flying swords began to revolve, but no matter how they revolved, the position of the 4 flying swords did not change. Xiao Hua was trapped in the core position and did not change in the slightest. At the same time, with the rotation of the flying swords, the restrictive whirlpool also sped up. Every time the whirlpool rotated, it was like a stone mill turning a circle. The crushing force on Xiao Hua's body also increased by a bit. However, when he saw the faint golden brilliance flashing around Xiao Hua's body, and it did not seem to be weakening, Qin Jian understood that Xiao Hua's body could withstand the power of the sword array. Hiss. Qin Jian took a deep breath. He felt that Xiao Hua was like a hedgehog with thorns. No matter where he attacked, he would not be able to succeed easily. However, his 4 symbols sword array only had this kind of power. If he wanted to increase it, he was afraid that he would have to cultivate to the transformation sword realm. Rise! Qin Jian clenched his teeth and formed a sword seal with both hands at the same time. The 2 flying swords on the 4 symbols sword array flashed with resplendent sword lights. The sword lights left the body and swam around the sword array like fish, piercing towards Xiaohua, who was in the middle of the array. Xiaohua calmed down and felt the changes in the restrictive power of the four symbols sword array. He felt that the power of the sword array had reached a certain level and it was difficult to increase it again. He knew that the power of the sword array had reached its limit. At this moment, Qin Jian changed his move again. The two sword lights followed the restrictive power of the sword array and rushed towards him. Moreover, these two sword lights were the same as before. There was a mysterious connection between them. As the two flying swords flew faster and faster, they pierced towards his shoulder at a faster speed than the previous two sword lights. As the saying goes, the expert looks at the skill while the layman looks at the excitement. When other cultivators saw these meteor-like sword lights, they had already panicked and were only thinking of how to block them. However, when Xiaohua's gaze swept over, he was first surprised. That's not right. There are 4 flying swords. How can there only be 2 sword lights? Xiaohua was actually very curious, because he saw the interaction of 2 sword lights, which was much faster than 1 sword light. What if there were 3 sword lights or 4 sword lights? Wouldn't it be even faster than before? If that was the case, Li Xiaobai's 9 stars transit was 9 flying swords. How fast would the flying swords be? Although there was no record of this in the sword slip left behind by Li Xiaobai, Xiaohua felt that the 9 stars transit was not as simple as he thought. Chapter 25-39. How could Xiaohua be afraid of these 2 sword lights? The sword array of Yin-Yang Twin Spring Mountain was many times more powerful than this sword array. Xiaohua was also leisurely strolling around. How could he put this sword array in his eyes? His shoulders trembled as he roared, "Old man, let me show you how powerful this young master is." With that said, the wishful steel staff danced in the air. Flowers bloomed and shadows of the staff appeared. Not only did it defeat the 2 sword lights, but it also broke free from the shackling power of the 4 divisions sword array. The wishful steel staff hit the 4 swords directly through the shackling power. 3 faint sword sounds were emitted from the 3 flying swords. The 4 flying swords were originally rotating in a regular manner, but now it was somewhat chaotic. Oh! Why are there 3 sword cries? Xiaohua's heart moved, and then his eyes narrowed as he laughed. Ha ha ha, this young master understands. This Qin Jian originally had 4 flying swords, but unfortunately, the invisible sword sneak attacked this young master. This young master first broke the sword array. He used one of the flying swords to create a sword light. It seems like there are 4 flying swords, but in fact, there are only 3 flying swords. Since Xiaohua had this idea, he immediately noticed the flaws of the 4 symbols sword array. He did not need to use his Dharma eye to check. The illusory flying sword followed the mother sword every time it spun, almost imitating it. The strength of this sub-sword was also inferior to the other 3 flying swords. How can this sword array imprison this young master? Xiaohua's eyes narrowed as he looked at the strange Qin Jian. That Qin Jian was like a hungry wolf, opening his bloody mouth wide to devour Xiaohua, this hedgehog. Who would have thought that although Xiaohua was forced to curl up, the sharp spikes on his back were so shocking, every single one of them could stab him. No wonder he could kill so many illusory swordsmen. His strength is amazing, and his body is well-tempered. In addition, he also has a flying sword and has studied the flying sword technique of us swordsmen. How can we have an advantage against him? Qin Jian hesitated. Moreover, this guy has not used the phoenix celestial body that made him famous. I don't know how powerful it is. It is said that the flying technique of the Imperial Thunder sect is also very powerful. I don't know how good this guy's lightning escape technique is. This old man. I'm afraid I'll have to see the situation today. Qin Jian had the intention to retreat, but he still did not want to give up this great situation. Just as he was thinking about how to use the secret technique again, he heard Xiaohua sneer, "Such a sword array is really broken. You actually dare to use it to show off in front of this young master." This sentence ignited Qin Jian's arrogance. Ordinary swordsman only cultivated one flying sword, but he had outstanding talent and obtained the opportunity to cultivate 4 flying swords. Moreover, he relied on these 4 flying swords to set up the sword array, which made him famous in the sword domain. In this sword battle, Black Phoenix Sword Sex LV Ruachan was appointed as the strategist of the battle by the sword transformation master. He originally had a trace of dissatisfaction in his heart, which was why he challenged the cultivators of the Dao sect at the beginning of the battle. In recent years, he had been moving unhindered between the country of Shi and the country of Huan. Although he relied on countless calculations and racked his brains, this flying sword technique and sword array technique were really powerful. Not to mention foundation establishment cultivators, even if a dozen golden core cultivators were to fall into his hands, they would not be able to fight back. Whether they were dizzy from the invisible sword or trapped by the 4 symbols sword array, they would lose their lives in vain. And today, Xiaohua actually said that he was trash. How could he let him breathe his last? This old man wants to see. Qin Jian sneered. Just as he was about to say something ruthless, he saw Xiaohua's figure suddenly accelerate. Like lightning, he rushed to a spot in front of him. This place was originally where his illusory flying sword's confinement force was. If it was under normal circumstances, the invisible sword would have already confined this place. However, his illusory flying sword was half a beat slower than the flying sword in front of him, and Xiaohua just happened to fly to the place where the confinement force was not produced. How did he see the flaw? Qin Jian turned pale with fright. Just as he was about to perform the sword technique, Xiaohua covered his Daoist robe and used the heaven and earth sleeve technique again, attacking the illusory flying sword. Boom! A muffled sound rang out, and a patch of fireflies was produced from the sword's light. Qin Jian's illusory flying sword was directly shattered by Xiaohua. How did this guy have magic power again? How did his magic power recover so quickly? The reason why Qin Jian hesitated was because he knew that Xiaohua had used up a lot of his magic power. Even if his methods were heavenly, without magic power, Xiaohua would not be Qin Jian's opponent. However, Xiaohua did not rely too much on magic power when he controlled the flying sword and waved the wishful scepter. Furthermore, the heavenly man body bestowment technique and the dragon transformation art were constantly circulating in his body. Naturally, his magic power recovered very quickly. When the corner of the 4 symbols sword array was broken, the sword array immediately collapsed, and all the confinement force disappeared. Qin Jian was afraid that Xiaohua would take back his other flying swords, so he immediately performed the sword technique and the 3 flying swords flew far away. Go, I will let you see the power of this young master. Xiaohua did not care about the 3 flying swords. With a wave of his hand, the sword pouch flew out. He performed the sword technique and 7 flying swords flew out. The shining sword light illuminated the night sky and surrounded Qin Jian. 7 stars sword array? Qin Jian's face showed surprise, but he was not particularly surprised. After all, he also knew about the sword array of the Lingfeng sword sect. He also knew that Ling Yunwu died in the hands of Xiaohua. Furthermore, Xiaohua knew about flying swords. With Qin Jian's scheming mind, how could he not guess? However, Qin Jian was still surprised that Xiaohua could control the sword pouch. Seeing the 7 flying swords of the illusory swordsman releasing the confinement force, the sword light around Qin Jian's body slightly overflowed. It fought against the sword array, but when the confinement force of the 7 stars sword array reached a certain level, it did not increase anymore. Furthermore, the 7 flying swords followed the trajectory of the 7 stars sword array and did not change further. Qin Jian's heart was at ease. Haha! Ignorant child! Qin Jian sneered, you only learned a little of my sword cultivation and you dare to say that you are teaching me a lesson. With your flying swords, you can't even compare to my grand disciple's disciple. As he spoke, the sword light around Qin Jian's body slowly moved as if he was breathing. This breathing was very rhythmic, as if it was responding to the confinement force of the 7 stars sword array. As he gradually synchronized with the sword array, the confinement force also began to fluctuate, matching with his sword light. What made Xiaohua even more uneasy was that the 7 flying swords of the 7 stars sword array also began to emit sword light, matching with Qin Jian's sword light. Obviously, this was another secret manual of sword cultivation. Go, Xiaohua was not in a hurry to retrieve the 7 stars sword array. Taking advantage of the fact that the confinement force of the battle was still there, he opened his mouth and the dream executioner that he had just retrieved flew out again, like a bright star entering the sword array. Childish. Qin Jian sneered. He pointed his finger and a sword light flew out from his finger, piercing towards the dream executioner. Whoosh, the dream executioner shook and turned into 2. Humph, Qin Jian was extremely disdainful. He had already seen the dream executioner's transformation. He flicked his finger and another sword light flew out to meet the enemy. Whoosh. The dream executioner shook again and turned into 4. Oh. Qin Jian was slightly surprised, but he flicked his finger again and 2 more sword lights flew out. Whoosh whoosh, the dream executioner shook again and in an instant, 16 sword lights were formed. Qin Jian was panicking. He could no longer care about the sword light around him. He swung his hands and dozens of sword lights flew out. Although he was doubtful about the power of these sword lights, he did not dare to test it out. However, what happened next made him even more dumbfounded. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, the 16 sword lights flashed again and turned into 64 sword lights. How is this possible? Qin Jian was shocked. The sword lights around him swayed and he was like a porcupine again. Many sword lights flew out to meet the enemy. It was also at this moment that the terrifying karma power on the green and red sword light came over, causing Qin Jian's heart to palpitate. At the same time, he suddenly came to a realization. Not good. Tu Hong. Tu Hong was killed by you. Ka 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 ka. 64 sword lights let out a crisp sound at the same time. Qin Jian suspected that the sword lights were all empty on the outside, but the sword lights actually managed to split apart Qin Jian's sword lights. It was like a sharp knife stabbing into a bamboo shoot. Every sword light was incomparably sharp, and they flew towards Qin Jian like a flurry of arrows. No, this is not the Dao Sect's flying sword. It is also not my sword cultivator's flying sword technique. Qin Jian suddenly realized and said in shock, who are you? That's right. Since he could kill a sword cultivator and a cultivator, and his divine skills were not the forte of these 2 sects, then where did he come from? Unfortunately, even if Xiaohua wanted to answer him, he could not. Although Xiaohua's sword lights were not as fast as Qin Jian's flying sword, Qin Jian was currently trapped in the 7 stars sword formation. How could he dodge it? The 64 sword lights pierced into Qin Jian's body without any difference. Qin Jian's body was covered with sword lights, as if 64 meteors were crashing into the sea of stars. Countless waves were stirred up. However, the strange thing was that when the 64 sword lights formed by the dream executioner crashed into Qin Jian's body, they valiantly passed through his body and flew out from the other side. However, Qin Jian's body only swayed slightly. The sword light on his body flickered slightly, but it immediately stabilized. A cold snort came from Qin Jian. Using a flying sword to go against a sword cultivator, you are simply a fool's dream. Qin Jian is already at the 3rd grade of the illusory sword. I'm afraid he will break through to the sword transformation realm soon. He should be able to transform into a sword at will. Since he can transform into a sword, my flying sword should not be able to kill Qin Jian easily. I have other plans. Xiaohua thought to himself. However, since the dream executioner can force Qin Jian to transform into a sword, its power is also extremely strong. I should be proud. Thinking about this, Xiaohua did not hesitate. On one hand, he controlled the 7 stars sword formation to imprison Qin Jian. On the other hand, he used the dream executioner to stab Qin Jian. In just a few breaths of time, the dream executioner stabbed into Qin Jian's body again and again. Although Qin Jian could transform into a sword, every time the dream executioner stabbed into his body, it would also cause him harm. Especially the Dream Executioner's Xiantian metal chi and the power of karma, it gradually destroyed Qin Jian's sword heart and sword transformation realm. Qin Jian increasingly felt that transforming into a sword was not easy. Chapter 25-40. Break. Qin Jian clenched his teeth. A mysterious wave emitted from his body. Qin Jian's straight body began to twist. As it twisted, the wave became more and more intense. The 7 flying swords of the 7-star sword formation were already flickering with Qin Jian's sword light. Under this wave, they began to wail and shake violently. Not good. How could Xiao Hua not know that Qin Jian was using a secret technique? He hastily formed a sword sign and was about to activate the sword pouch to retrieve the 7 flying swords. However, it was fine if Xiao Hua didn't form a sword sign. When the sword sign hit the sword pouch also violently shook. There was a strong repulsive force from the sword pouch, resisting Xiao Hua's activation. Damn it! Xiao Hua was furious. The Dream Executioner flashed again and charged at Qin Jian. What shocked Xiao Hua even more was that Qin Jian seemed to be invisible. The Dream Executioner charged past Qin Jian's distorted image without stopping at all. It flashed past. Attack. Xiao Hua no longer hesitated. At the same time that he recalled the Dream Executioner, he used his 2 hands to summon lightning. Ka-cha-cha. In the night sky, dozens of thick lightning bolts suddenly appeared and struck at Qin Jian. The huge lightning bolt struck Qin Jian's image dozens of times. However, as the lightning bolts lingered, the image quickly recovered. In fact, Qin Jian's image became even more ethereal. Ha ha ha. Qin Jian's wild laughter sounded from the image. A huge sword shape appeared from the image. This sword shape actually carried lightning. Woo! That sword light seemed to be slow but was actually fast. In an instant, it was in front of Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua had never seen such a fast flying sword. He was scared out of his wits. He hurriedly formed a hand sign. It was the heaven and earth sleeve technique. However, when this technique was formed, it was as if it hit the void. That flying sword was not afraid of this restrictive force at all. It pierced through Xiao Hua's hand. This flying sword is not real. Xiao Hua suddenly realized. The wishful staff in his hand hurriedly flashed in front of him, wanting to block this flying sword. However, he was still a bit too slow. He only managed to sweep the tail of the flying sword. That intangible flying sword could not be stopped from rushing into Xiao Hua's forehead. Ah! The golden light on Xiao Hua's forehead flickered, and the golden light protecting his body merely flickered. He didn't even try to resist. An incomparable palpitation spread from the bottom of Xiao Hua's heart. It was as if he was facing a great crisis, a crisis that Xiao Hua was unable to resist. Just as Xiao Hua was about to win, he suddenly appeared, boom. There was a loud explosion in Xiao Hua's mind as the invisible flying sword pierced straight into his mind and into a mysterious part of his soul. The boom came from the soul armament protecting Xiao Hua's dark clouds. It had blocked the flying sword, but the web of soul armament was reduced to nothing under the attack of the flying sword. Oh no! Xiao Hua was shocked. He never thought that Qin Jian would have such a soul sword technique that could directly kill a cultivator's soul. If it weren't for the soul armament he'd accidentally obtained outside of his soul, wouldn't he have already perished from that attack? You have a soul armament too? Qin Jian's voice sounded surprised. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, Xiao Hua didn't dare to be careless. Countless soul strands extended out from the dark clouds and swept towards the flying sword like thousands of tentacles. The moment the intangible soul sword was entangled by the soul strands, it immediately let out a sharp cry. The resplendent sword light illuminated the entire dark clouds. Woo! The flying sword stirred up a gust of wind as it tried its best to pierce through the dark clouds. Xiao Hua's soul strands flickered as he tried his best to block the flying sword. However, his soul power was simply too weak. It was only able to block for a moment before the flying sword pierced through the dark clouds. A never-before-experienced fear emerged from the bottom of Xiao Hua's heart. As long as the flying sword pierced through the dark clouds, his soul would be destroyed by Qin Jian. Even if he didn't die, would the Xiao Hua who lost his soul still be Xiao Hua? Just as Xiao Hua was facing an unprecedented crisis, Qin Jian, who was in his sword form, was also in a bad situation. A soul sword wasn't something an ordinary swordsman could use. Even Qin Jian, a third-grade illusory swordsman, couldn't use it. The soul sword used the soul energy of the body. It was something Xiao Hua couldn't achieve even after many years of soul cultivation. Qin Jian had a few secret techniques and tricks, but when he used them, it didn't just cost his soul, but his body as well. Even an expert as strong as Qin Jian couldn't withstand the backlash of his soul power when he used his soul sword. Only when he was in his sword form did Qin Jian dare to try it. And even when he was in his sword form, Qin Jian had to pay a heavy price to use a soul sword. It could even be said that he and Xiao Hua would perish together. This was something the calculative Qin Jian wasn't willing to do. He would only do it as a last resort. Just now, when Xiao Hua attracted the heavenly lightning, he just happened to have a thunder cry sword. This sword was his secret weapon. He didn't reveal it because he wanted to attack Xiao Hua while he was attracting the heavenly lightning. However, when the heavenly lightning struck the thunder cry sword, the enormous power of the heavenly lightning stimulated the power of his soul, and this soul sword was displayed beyond his imagination. But much to Qin Jian's surprise, Xiao Hua had a soul armament and even soul force. Though the soul force he had was weak, Qin Jian waited for Xiao Hua's soul to dissipate. He was already thinking of a way to make up for the losses he had suffered in this battle. It seems, this old man was careless, but I can't remember where I was careless. Qin Jian, who already had victory in his grasp, suddenly felt that there was a flaw somewhere. It seemed that he had overlooked something when he was fighting against Xiao Hua. But just as Xiao Hua was about to lose all hope and Qin Jian was about to gloat over his victory, a dragon's roar echoed in Xiao Hua's mind and shook Qin Jian's soul. Just as the soul sword pierced through the mysterious dark clouds, a ferocious-looking dragon head emerged. Although the dragon head's eyes were closed and it looked much fainter than the soul sword, it was still a dragon's head. A majestic aura emanated from the dragon's head. The dragon's head opened its mouth and an unparalleled force enveloped the soul sword. The soul sword was swallowed by the dragon's head without being able to put up any resistance. Then, the dragon head retreated back into the dark clouds. Everything outside of the clouds returned to silence as if the dragon head had never appeared. Xiao Bai. Xiao Hua was caught off guard by the appearance of the little white dragon's soul. It was only when the little white dragon retreated back into the clouds that Xiao Hua realized what had happened. The little white dragon had saved Xiao Hua's life today, but it could also be said that the little white dragon had saved its own life. Ah! Qin Jian couldn't help but scream. The soul sword being swallowed was the pain of his soul being torn apart. It was far more painful than any physical pain. This old man will fight it out with you. After losing his soul sword, Qin Jian's soul was no longer whole. His consciousness was a little blurry. He couldn't react to the sudden appearance of the dragon head in Xiao Hua's soul. He didn't know how to think about such an unbelievable thing. In fact, it was extremely difficult for Qin Jian to get out of the sword form again. But after hearing Qin Jian scream, the sword form suddenly solidified. A huge flying sword let out a loud sword cry. This cry reverberated through the 9 heavens and a pressure comparable to that of a nascent soul cultivator was emitted from the huge sword. Xiao Hua had lost his phoenix celestial body. How could he resist this pressure? Xiao Hua hurriedly used his concealment technique to resist the pressure. However, he was too close to Qin Jian. The pressure was pressing down on him. Xiao Hua didn't have much true yuan in his meridians to begin with. The true yuan in his meridians was almost stagnant. Xiao Hua couldn't even lift a finger. This old man is stupid. Qin Jian's consciousness was already blurred. But when he saw this scene, he immediately knew where his mistake was. He had schemed against Xiao Hua for a long time, but he still missed the most basic of pressure. He didn't expect that Xiao Hua, who killed several illusory swords, was only at the Foundation establishment late stage. It's not too late now. Qin Jian's heart was filled with regret, but there was still hope for survival. The entire flying sword slashed down. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth within a few hundred feet was absorbed by the flying sword. A huge force comparable to that of a nascent soul cultivator held Xiao Hua tightly. Pooh! Xiao Hua opened his mouth and the last bit of spiritual fire he could summon flew out. The moment the spiritual fire appeared in the air, Xiao Hua's fire control art spread out like a net and flew toward the giant sword. However, wherever the spiritual fire net passed, there was not a single ripple. It did not disturb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth at all. However, the restrictive power of the giant sword was swept away by the spiritual fire net. Fight! Xiao Hua now had no spiritual energy in his body. He could only use the wind escape technique to raise his staff and fly behind the net of spiritual fire, smashing towards the huge sword. Rumble. The huge roar shook the surroundings again. Sure enough, Xiao Hua's expectation was true. Although the net of spiritual fire was powerful, it caught the huge sword and even began to burn it, but the falling momentum of the huge sword did not change. Xiao Hua swung his staff just in time. The huge sword was actually blocked by Xiao Hua, but Xiao Hua was even worse. His body fell straight into the air like a meteorite. Roar! The spiritual fire ignited the huge sword, almost burning into Qin Jian's soul. His primordial spirit gradually fused with the sword spirit was awakened. While feeling the pain, Qin Jian also realized the danger. Run! This was the first time Qin Jian made such a decision since the Battle of Swords. Buzz! The huge sword light shone brightly and moved like a stream of light, flying towards the north. But just as the huge sword was flying, a cold voice came, "Old man, are you leaving? This young master will send you on your way." As the voice spoke, a pool of clear water fell from the sky, blocking the front of the flying sword. Innate primordial water? Qin Jian's primordial spirit was burned by the spiritual fire, and he could not help but scream in pain. Where do you have any spiritual energy left? Do you need spiritual energy to drive the innate primordial water? Xiao Hua flew crookedly in the air, looking extremely weak. He could only use the flying technique. But even so, the water curtain of innate primordial water changed with Xiao Hua's spell and quickly closed up, sealing the huge sword in a space. Buzz! The huge sword cried and crashed into the water curtain. Unfortunately, not only was Qin Jian an arrow at the end of its flight, but the water curtain was so tough that it not only corroded the huge sword, but also confused the part of Qin Jian's primordial spirit that crashed into the water curtain. But the strange thing was that the spiritual fire in the innate primordial water was still not extinguished, and it even showed signs of flourishing. Ha ha ha! Qin Jian obediently turned into a sword. This way, you can still accompany Ling Yunwu and the others. Xiao Hua's wild laughter came from the water curtain. He was really happy. The quality of this flying sword was definitely better than Ling Yunwu and the others. Qin Jian's primordial spirit was already weak and lost. He had already fused with the sword spirit more than half. When he heard Xiao Hua's arrogance, he immediately thought of the 7 flying swords of the 7 stars formation. How could Qin Jian be controlled by Xiao Hua after his death? The sword light on the huge sword suddenly retracted, and then expanded again. The huge sword opened up with a boom, and an earth-shattering sound exploded in the innate primordial water. This was the self-destruction of a late golden core stage cultivator. In an instant, the entire water curtain exploded, and the fragments of the huge sword broke through the innate primordial water and flew in all directions. At this time, the sky was already bright, and the sword light reflected the sunlight. It was extremely dazzling and beautiful. No one would have thought that this dazzling scenery was actually the funeral of a sword cultivator. A flying sword fragment brushed past Xiao Hua's chin and flew away, scaring Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua only had time to grab one fragment before the rest of the fragments flew all over the place. There were even a few fragments that fell into the river. Xiao Hua let out a sigh of relief, and his figure slowly landed on the foot of a mountain. His whole body was numb. Damn it! I escaped from the tiger's den again. Xiao Hua was extremely tired as he thought. At this moment, he really wanted to lie down and have a good sleep. The fight just now had really made him extremely tired. However, when the ray of sunlight from the east shone on Xiao Hua's body, Xiao Hua stretched, clenched his hand, and slowly punched out the Big Dipper magical fist. An extremely strange scene appeared. The faint brilliance of the rising sun fell on the flowing ice valley. The river water was still sparkling, and it hit the mountain peak. Within the sparkling light, large and small flowing ice roared. Following the current, the sound of the waves was ear-splitting. On top of the towering mountain peak, a tall and thin cultivator was calm and composed. Every move was like a virgin, and every move was like a fleeing rabbit. He didn't know how many divine wills swept past him and how many gazes were looking at him from afar. However, all the gazes flashed by and all the divine wills were gone. No swordsman's divine wills dared to linger in this place for even a moment. Even the divine wills that swept past him were anxious and cautious to the extreme. That's right, the battle between Xiao Hua and Qin Jian was so powerful. Qin Jian's cultivation was close to transforming into a sword, and all the swordsmen within a dozen miles could feel his sword intent. That sword intense anger, the sword intense fear, and the sword intense despair, they could all feel it. Especially Xiao Hua's lightning-attracting technique, which made their hearts tremble. Terrifying Phoenix. This name was instantly imprinted in their hearts. Chapter 2541. At this moment, the battle had ended. Qin Jian had turned into a sword and self-destructed. Not only was Xiao Hua's innate primordial water unable to block it, but all the swordsmen within a dozen miles had sensed his determination to fall into a desperate situation through their flying swords. Qin Jian had died, but what about Xiao Hua from the Imperial Thunder Sect? He was actually leisurely practicing his fists at the foot of the mountain. The indifference on Xiao Hua's face and his casual fists only let them know that the battle just now was just a small matter. Although he didn't have any power or terrifying spiritual energy fluctuations, which swordsman would dare to take half a step forward? A cool current flowed through his bones, and that comfortable feeling gradually overflowed within Xiao Hua's body. Xiao Hua closed his eyes comfortably, as if he really liked this tranquil atmosphere. "Big brother." An extremely respectful voice sounded. It was Xiao Mao who had flown over. Xiao Hua opened his eyes slightly, but did not answer. He saw Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao landing about 10 feet away from him, standing with their hands by their sides. They were waiting quietly. Seeing that Xiao Hua was ignoring them, they did not dare to ask. After finishing a set of Big Dipper mystical fists, Xiao Hua stopped and smiled. "How are your injuries?" "I took some elixirs, so there shouldn't be any problems." Xiao Mao looked at Li Zongbao, who had a complicated expression, and hurriedly answered. He did not have any obstacles when facing Xiao Hua, whose cultivation was extraordinary, but Li Zongbao probably had some ideas. That's good." Xiao Hua sighed and said to Li Zongbao, "I'm afraid that we have wasted our trip to the flowing ice valley. I originally wanted to chop off Qin Jian's head, but who would have thought that he would turn into a sword, and this flying sword? I was unable to take it down. Qin Jian self-destructed, so his storage bag and other items are probably gone. We don't have any proof, so how can we claim credit from the conference hall?" Hearing Xiao Hua call himself a little brother, a trace of warmth flashed through Li Zongbao's eyes. He pointed to the ground and said, "Things don't seem as complicated as junior brother Xiao thinks." "Oh." Xiao Hua looked down and saw a fist-sized piece of flesh. "This is..." Xiao Hua was slightly taken aback, but then he laughed loudly. Indeed, this flesh and blood was similar to a fragment of the flying sword that Qin Jian had transformed into when he had self-destructed. Xiao Hua casually took it and threw it on the ground. At this moment, that fragment had turned into flesh and blood again. How strange. Xiao Hua scratched his head and thought to himself, since Qin Jian has already turned into a sword, after the explosion, it should be the fragments of the flying sword. Why did it turn into flesh and blood? However, since there was flesh and blood, there should be fragments of Qin Jian's head as well. Now that Xiao Hua and the others had the basis to ask for a reward, who would care about why he escaped from the sword transformation? Ha ha ha, the heavens are helping me. Xiao Hua laughed loudly. Big brother and senior brotherly, please wait here. I will go and look for them now. Xiao Mao was also overjoyed. Junior brother Xiao, rest here. I will go with Xiao Mao to search for him. Although Li Zongbao's face was indifferent, he was secretly happy. Although he did not personally kill Qin Jian, Xiao Hua and Xiao Mao were in the same team as him. This merit belonged to none other than the three of them. Okay, Xiao Hua did not decline. Although Qin Jian had self-destructed, his flesh and blood were only scattered within a few li. With the two's divine senses, it would be easy to find him. When the two of them went in different directions, Xiao Hua released his divine senses and scanned the area within a few li. All the swordsmen who came into contact with Xiao Hua's divine senses were shocked and fled. Damn it, this young master's reputation is a little troublesome. Xiao Hua had a headache. He actually killed Qin Jian in front of so many swordsmen. It was impossible for his reputation not to spread far and wide. Others were afraid that his reputation would not spread far and wide, but Xiao Hua was worried. Xiao Hua waved the Big Dipper magical fist again. His primordial spirit that had fused with his bones swam within them. After looking at the condition of his bones, Xiao Hua was the same as before. He sighed, this bone tempering is really the work of dripping water to penetrate a stone. Without a certain degree of polishing, there will not be any progress at all. This Big Dipper magical fist was the bone tempering technique this young master used when he had a fire attribute physique. Now, it is no longer of much use. There are still so many fine orange spots. It seems that the earth crystal Ya milk cannot speed up the progress of the bone tempering technique too much. I wonder when it will reach the limit. Actually, not only was there no improvement in bone honing, there was also not much improvement in the dragon transformation incantation and heavenly infusion technique. However, now that Little White had returned, he could ask Little White about the dragon transformation incantation after she recovered. Xiao Hua waved his fists and legs as he thought. It was rare for him to be able to leisurely practice martial arts on the foothills. After 4 hours, Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao flew back. Seeing Xiao Mao's gloomy face, Xiao Hua's heart sank. He asked in a low voice, how is it? Could it be that that bastard Qin Jian really split into thousands of blood vessels and there is no trace of him left? Hee. Seeing Xiao Hua's anxiety, Xiao Mao clapped his hands and laughed, Big brother, look. As he spoke, he took out a sword token from his storage bag. Xiao Hua glanced at it and did not take it. He shook his head slightly, even if it is Qin Jian's token, I am afraid that it is not enough to prove that Qin Jian died in our hands. What about this? Although Li Zongbao's face was cold, his eyes flashed with a trace of ecstasy. He reached out his hand and took out half a head from his storage bag. Oh. Xiao Hua's eyebrows relaxed and his eyes lit up. This head was not complete, only half of it. But what was amazing was that this half was half of Qin Jian's face. If it was put together with the sword token, it would definitely prove the identity of this head. I also found a lot of remains. Xiao Mao laughed, if we forcefully put them together, we might be able to piece together a complete corpse, fuck. Xiao Hua finally understood why Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao took such a long time to come back. They had searched the surrounding 10 miles, and other than the corpses that had fallen into the river, they couldn't find anything else. Everything else should be here. Xiao Hua's eyes lit up and he hurriedly asked, what about the other things? They are all here. Li Zongbao took out a storage bag and handed it to Xiao Hua. Xiao Mao and I knew that junior brother Xiao might be useful, so we came over. But, it might not be useful. Hearing Li Zongbao's words, Xiaohua's heart that had just been filled with hope sank again. As expected, when he took the storage bag, there were a lot of things inside. It might be Qin Jian's, or it might not be Qin Jian's, but they were all tattered and not a single one was complete. The sword token and flying sword that Xiaohua wanted was also not there. Oh, this is in good condition. Xiaohua's divine sense swept over it. It was an extremely simple triangular object that was in tatters. He could not see its origin. Xiaohua took out the triangular object and looked at it for a moment. He could not figure out what it was, but since Qin Jian's self-destruction could not destroy it, it must be extremely hard. This item. I will take it. Xiaohua looked at Li Zongbao and smiled. This is all junior brother Zhao's, there is no need to ask me. How could Li Zongbao have any objections? Thank you, senior brother Li. Xiaohua smiled and kept the storage bag. He looked around and said, I have troubled senior brother Li about this matter. This Qin Jian was also killed by you, me, and Xiao Mao. As for the details, senior brother will make the decision. I know this. Li Zongbao looked at Xiao Mao, we obtained such a great merit out of nowhere, and the rewards are also great. Xiao Mao and I will naturally have to consider carefully. Good. Xiaohua nodded. He looked into the distance and said, the sword cultivators are already gathering again. My Dao sex cultivators are also stopping in the distance. Let's go. Wait a moment. Li Zongbao bit his lips and said, I still have to find Martial Uncle Chu Hui's corpse. It would be even better if I can find Martial Uncle Su Bo's corpse. This. Xiaohua frowned slightly. After all, the Flowing Ice Valley's Spirit Stone Mine was now filled with sword cultivators. Although the three of them were powerful, it would be dangerous for them to go there now. That day, I went to the country of Shi for Martial Uncle Chu Hui's personal matters. I met junior brother Xiao An. Li Zongbao said intermittently, Martial Uncle took good care of me. Even the Taiqing Sex Feather Immortal Gathering was promoted by Martial Uncle Chu Hui. If I can't find Martial Uncle Chu Hui's corpse, I won't be able to eat or sleep in peace. Oh. There is such a karma. Xiaohua suddenly realized that the question Li Zongbao had asked about the devil cultivators on the Thousand Zhang Mountain was actually about Chu Hui. Forget it. Xiaohua waved his hand and said, Senior brother Li, come with me. Since junior brother Li is willing to help because of junior brother Chu Hui, junior brother will definitely do his best. After saying that, Xiaohua flew up and flew towards the place where he saw Qin Jian kill Chu Hui. That place wasn't too far from here, but at this time, there were many swordsmen entrenched there. Seeing Xiaohua, this fiend, actually flying towards them, the crowd of swordsmen couldn't help but be frightened out of their wits. They hastily fled. How could they still dare to stay in place? When Xiaohua landed at the foot of the mountain, he used his divine perception to search carefully. After a long while, Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao flew over. Over there. Xiaohua pointed and said in a low voice, the corpses of the two martial uncles are here. I just don't know if the things inside are intact. Let's go over. Li Zongbao was overjoyed when he heard that. He hurriedly moved and landed at the riverside. Chu Hui and Su Bo's mangled corpses were hanging on the riverside. Their corpses were still intact, and their storage bags were hanging on their waists. Obviously, after Qin Jian killed the two of them, he immediately chased after Xiaohua and the others. He didn't have time to give orders, so the swordsman didn't dare to casually deal with the corpses. Near, there are thousands of corpses. What does senior brother Li think? Xiaohua was a little dispirited and asked in a low voice. Junior brother Xiao is tired. Let me and Xiao Mao clean them up. Li Zongbao's heart was filled with sorrow. However, this sorrow was gradually driven away by the parting love treasure mirror. He only pondered for a moment before replying. Chapter 25-42. No need. Xiao Hua sighed, let's do it together. These are the brave warriors of my Dao sect. If I don't collect their corpses, I won't be able to rest easy. With that, Xiao Hua flew up and flew in a certain direction. He waved his hands and all the corpses of the Dao sect cultivators fell into his hands. Then, he put them into his storage bag. As for the sword cultivator corpses, Xiao Hua did not touch them at all. He only collected the storage bag and flying sword. It took them more than an hour to collect the corpses. However, other than the surging river water and the occasional sweep of divine sense, no one came to disturb them. It was quite peaceful. Let's go. After all, Xiao Hua was used to collecting corpses. He was the first to fly into the air. After waiting for a while, Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao also flew over. Xiao Hua waved his hand and flew to the south. After the three of them flew for a long time, the thousands of swordsmen flew out hesitantly. Some of them cleaned up the battlefield, while some of them flew to other places. They should be notifying the other illusory sword division masters. Xiao Hua and the others only flew for an hour. Along the way, they collected many corpses of the cultivators. Then, they turned to the west. Li Zongbao originally wanted to point out the direction, but when he saw Xiao Hua's confidence, he knew that Xiao Hua had found something. Therefore, he kept quiet. Sure enough, not long after, Li Zongbao's divine sense also found that there were thousands of cultivators gathered not far away. They seemed to be waiting and planning something. When Li Zongbao and the others flew closer, these cultivators realized that these cultivators were the cultivators that Xiao Hua had opened up the underground passage and rescued. When the cultivators saw Li Zongbao and the others return safely, they were all overjoyed. The crowd shouted and stepped forward to greet Li Zongbao and the others. At the same time, they thanked Li Zongbao for saving their lives. At this time, Xiao Hua was extremely shy. He quietly hid behind Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao. Although he was smiling, he did not speak. Hee, you're welcome, you're welcome. Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao knew Xiao Hua's thoughts, so they naturally took half a step forward and returned the greeting. The emotions of the crowd, who had just survived a calamity, were somewhat emotional. Over 1,000 people surrounded the three of them, words of gratitude ceaselessly filling their ears. A long while later, Li Zongbao waved his hand again, indicating for the crowd to quiet down. Then, he said, today's battle at Ice Flow Valley can be considered as a setback for us. Tens of thousands of disciples were killed or injured. However, I'm afraid even more sword cultivators will perish under the attacks of these disciples. In this way, we'll be able to give an explanation to the discussion hall. Right now, we need to gather the remaining disciples. First, we need to deal with the future attacks of cultivators, and second, we need to see what plans we have for the future. Yes, we understand. Among the 1,000 disciples, there were disciples of the Utopia faction, the Changbai faction, and the Cool Breeze Valley. Those disciples of the Utopia faction were already shouting loudly. They had been driven so far away by the sword cultivators, so they didn't have the time to check on the situation at Ice Flow Valley. At this time, they didn't know that Qin Jian had been killed by Xiao Hua. Li Zongbao tilted his head slightly and sent a message to Xiao Hua. Then, he turned back to the dozens of disciples of the Utopia faction and said, you all go to various places. There are other disciples there. After you find them, wait for us at a place more than 300 miles ahead. Yes, the disciples of the Utopia faction received the order and flew in groups of 3 to 5 to the places that Li Zongbao had mentioned. The disciples of the other factions flew forward under Li Zongbao's lead. 300 miles away, there was an ice field that was slightly higher than other places. A group of cultivators landed on the ice field. They consumed pills and adjusted their breathing and true core strength. Some cultivators flew out to patrol the area. After half a day, dozens of Utmost Happiness faction disciples returned. Along with them, there were close to 10,000 disciples from the three factions. Half of these disciples had followed Li Zongbao out of the Spirit Stone Mine, while the other half had followed Xie Hui and Su Bo out of the Spirit Stone Mine. Jian Boming, who was close to Li Zongbao, was also killed by the sword cultivators. Greetings, Senior Brother Li and Senior Brother Xiao. Although Yi Bei of the Changbai sect did not have the highest cultivation among the disciples of the Changbai sect, he had helped Li Zongbao in the karst cave. Now, he had gained the support of many disciples of the Changbai sect. Moreover, the disciples of the Changbai sect were protected by the sword origin, and there were more survivors than the Utopia faction and the Cool Breeze Valley. Without Li Zongbao's command, he was the leader of these disciples. However, when he saw Li Zongbao and the other two, he hurried forward to salute them and thank them for saving his life. Li Zongbao hurriedly helped him up and said, "My sect's martial uncle Chu Hui, your sect's martial uncle Li Feiyu, and Cool Breeze Valley's martial uncle Su Bo have all fallen. When I was collecting martial uncle Chu Hui's corpse, I found martial uncle Li Feiyu's corpse and storage pouch. I will return these items to Junior Brother Yi." As he spoke, Li Zongbao was about to take out his storage bag. Yi Bei looked sad, but then he waved his hand and said, "Senior Brother Li, don't worry. It's not safe to leave Uncle Li's body with me. Why don't you take the bodies of the three Uncle Xia Hui and bring them back to the Sky Patrol City?" "Fine." Li Zongbao thought for a while and nodded. Then Li Zongbao asked curiously, "Junior Brother Yi, you mean, you can't go back to the Sky Patrol City with me?" Yi Bei smiled bitterly and looked at the others. He said, "That's right. We are not like Senior Brother Li and the two Senior Brothers Xiao. We were ordered to attack the spiritual stone mine in the flowing ice valley. It would be best if we could conquer it. Even if we couldn't, we had to find out the strength of the swordsman in the flowing ice valley. Then, we had to wait for further orders in the flowing ice valley. Just now, when I received your message, I had already sent the disciples of my faction, and the disciples of your faction and the Cool Breeze Valley according to the previous arrangement. We just need to wait for orders." "Oh, I see." Li Zongbao nodded slightly. He understood that there were further arrangements in the conference hall of the Sky Patrol City. However, he had not heard Chu Hui mention it. Apparently, Chu Hui did not intend to leave Li Zongbao there. After all, Li Zongbao's purpose was to kill Qin Jian. Alas, it was supposed to be a smooth attack. Yi Bei looked at the cultivators who were sitting cross-legged and taking elixirs to adjust their qi circulation. He sighed and said, "But who knew that there would be so many twists and turns? First, we were at a disadvantage. When the three senior brothers turned the tide, we encountered the spirit-binding juice. After the three senior brothers used their divine skills to rescue us from the underground karst cave, we actually met the fiend Qin Jian. Not to mention the death of the three Gold Core Realm seniors, the three factions lost thousands of disciples. There were more than 30,000 disciples who attacked the flowing ice valley that day. Today, there are only about 10,000 disciples left." Then, Yi Bei looked at the distant sky. There were already some dark clouds. He said worriedly, "This place is still close to the flowing ice valley. If Qin Jian chases after us, it will be inappropriate. Let's retreat. According to the plan, there will be disciples from the Sky Patrol City hundreds of miles ahead." Speaking of this, Yi Bei hesitated again. "By the way, if we retreat and attract Qin Jian's attention, it will be inappropriate to lead the swordsman there." Don't worry." Xiao Mao said with a smile, "I'm afraid that Qin Jian will not be able to catch up with us in this lifetime." "Ah." Yi Bei was stunned, and then he was overjoyed. He looked at Li Zongbao in disbelief and said hurriedly, "Senior Brother Li, what does Senior Brother Xiao mean?" "That's right. Qin Jian was seriously injured under the fierce attacks of Martial Uncle Chu Hui and Martial Uncle Su Bo. He chased after the three of us, but he fell into my trap. Junior Brother Xiao and I joined forces to kill him. This is considered as revenge for the three martial uncles," Li Zongbao said calmly. Li Zongbao's voice wasn't loud, but it was thunderous. Everyone was like Yi Bei, looking at Li Zongbao, Xiao Hua, and Xiao Mao in disbelief. They almost didn't dare to believe their own ears. Li Zongbao looked at the demoralized cultivators. He clapped his hands and took out half of Qin Jian's head. He raised his hands and said, "Look! Qin Jian's dog head is in my hands. My fellow cultivators, the senior brothers and junior brothers who died in the flowing ice valley can rest in peace." Boom! The crowd could not help but murmur. The whole place was in chaos. All the cultivators who were meditating opened their eyes. The demoralized cultivators were suddenly reignited. Senior brother Li's cultivation is really high. He has really made our Utopia faction proud. The disciples of the Utopia faction shouted at the side. The disciples of the Changbai sect and the Cool Breeze Valley also clamored, "Senior brother Xiao Hua, senior brother Xiao Mao's cultivation is really high. I admire you so much." Li Zongbao watched the crowd clamor as all the flattering words flowed past his ears. Moments later, he kept Qin Jian's head into his storage bag and said in a clear voice, "Qin Jian's cultivation is indeed extraordinary and the ambush he set up is also formidable." However, he was still unable to escape from the magical treasures of our Dao sect disciples. "We are merely at the advanced foundation establishment stage and we are able to kill him. There is no need for the Jindan stage elders in the discussion hall to act." What does this mean? The swordsmen will lose, and we cultivators will win. The disciples of the Utopia faction shouted. Exactly. Li Zongbao raised his hand and shouted, "Kill Qin Jian, kill the sword cultivators, kill our way through the sword catacomb, and kill our way into the Han country. Our Dao sect will win. Kill Qin Jian, our Dao sect will win." Li Zongbao's words were really well received. All the cultivators raised their arms and shouted. The shouts of more than 10,000 cultivators resounded through the heavens and earth. Even though there was no echo in the snowfield, the momentum was really shocking. Damn it! Even though Xiao Hua was a little depressed after the big battle, he was instantly infected by the cheers of the 10,000 cultivators. He was a little excited. The crowd waited for the time it took to eat a meal before Li Zongbao calmed them down. After they calmed down a little, they arranged themselves according to the division of their sects and the arrangement of their teams. They formed a certain formation to rest and adjust their breathing. The other three sects, other than Yi Bei of the Changbai sect, chose another 2 disciples to be the commanders. Chapter 25-43. Qin Jian was killed, and the sword cultivators in the spiritual stone mine in Flowing Ice Valley were also injured. The swordsmen won't come after us. Li Zongbao saw that the situation was stable and said, "Junior brothers Xiao and I will not stay here any longer. We'll leave the tens of thousands of disciples to you. Junior brothers, please discuss things carefully and don't be impulsive." "Yes, we understand." Yi Bei looked at the 2 of them and smiled. "Senior brother Li, don't worry. Since there are follow-up arrangements in the meeting hall, we won't have to wait here for too long. Besides, senior brother Li and the 2 senior brothers Xiao have killed Qin Jian. Even if you're not here, the sword cultivators won't dare to attack." That's true. Junior brother Ye's words make sense. Thinking of Xiao Hua standing in Flowing Ice Valley, the sword cultivators all retreated. The swordsmen didn't know that the 3 of them had left, so they wouldn't dare to attack. Li Zongbao nodded and replied, "In that case, we'll return to Sky Patrol City. You'd better be careful." "Yes, farewell, senior brothers." The 3 elders in the later stage of foundation establishment had white hair and beards, but they didn't dare to be negligent in the face of the 3 people who could kill Qin Jian. They bowed and sent them off. Seeing the 3 of them fly away, the cultivators' eyes were filled with admiration. At the same time, the sense of security they had just gained faded away. Xiao Hua and the other 2 flew back to Sky Patrol City from Flowing Ice Valley. In just 2 days, they met 3 groups of Taoist cultivators who were heading towards Huan Kingdom. They were disciples from Meng Kingdom and Lian Kingdom. There were many of them, and the cultivators who led the group were in the early and middle stage of the Golden Core realm. It seemed that they were going to make a final attack on the swordsmen of Huan Kingdom. Li Zongbao also found out that one of the groups was heading toward the flowing ice valley. The disciples of the Utopia faction, the Changbai faction, and the Cool Breeze Valley were with them. As for how to attack and where to attack, Li Zongbao didn't ask much. Apparently, the middle-stage Golden Core Realm Master who was leading the group wouldn't tell them. After flying for a few more days, Xiao Hua was surprised and whispered, "Senior Brother Li, I feel that something is wrong." "Why?" Li Zongbao asked. After thinking for a while, Xiao Hua muttered, "I remember that when we were on our way here, we met many Huan Kingdom swordsmen. Although their cultivation levels varied, they seemed to be obstructing us. However, when we returned to Sky Patrol City today, we did not meet any swordsmen. It's really strange." Li Zongbao smiled and said, "Can't you see that the Dao sect cultivators have already gathered in groups and are about to launch a fierce attack on the sword cultivators? Our Dao sect's cultivators do not hide their tracks, and I'm sure that they have already detected us. Therefore, they must have gathered and prepared to face the enemy. Therefore, there are very few disciples patrolling the area and I don't even see them. Perhaps, after this battle, according to the changes in the battlefield, there will be other unforeseen events." "Okay." Xiao Hua was skeptical, but he knew that he was not as good as Li Zongbao in this aspect, so he did not ask any more questions. On the return journey, Xiao Mao continued to operate the flowing cloud flying ship. Xiao Hua sat cross-legged, sometimes closing his eyes, sometimes deep in thought, as if he was thinking of something, but also as if he was concentrating on comprehending something. As for Li Zongbao, after seeing Xiao Hua's true strength, he spoke even less than before. However, his attitude towards Xiao Hua was not overly respectful because of this. He said what he should say, and also called him Junior Brother Xiao. After more than 10 days, the Sky Patrol City was in sight. Before Xiao Hua could stop them, Li Zongbao asked Xiao Mao to stop the airship. Then he looked at Xiao Hua and said, "Junior Brother Xiao, this Sky Patrol City, you don't have to enter. You can fly faster than us and you have this flowing cloud airship with you. It should be good for you to pass some messages. I will send you to the north of the Sky Patrol City and inform the disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect and the Utopia faction about the battle in the flowing ice valley and the 7 Extremes mountains. What do you think?" Xiao Hua knew Li Zongbao's intention. He said with a smile, "Senior Brother Li, how can I disobey your order? I will set off now. I just don't know, how can I report to Senior Brother Li after I complete the task?" Li Zongbao disagreed and said, "After the battle in Flowing Ice Valley, our team of 3 will definitely be famous in Sky Patrol City. At that time, you only need to tell them your name or someone's name. Which disciple won't know? After you complete the task, you just need to find Xiao Mao and me." Xiao Hua understood Li Zongbao's sincerity. He bowed and said, "Thank you, Senior Brother Li. I will definitely complete the task." "Okay, you can kill the swordsman." Li Zongbao nodded. "The credit is not only yours, but also the credit of the first team of the Imperial Thunder sect." "I understand." Xiao Hua nodded. Then Li Zongbao waved his hand and flew up. Xiao Mao bowed to Xiao Hua and flew up after him. "Oh, by the way, Xiao Mao, I have something to tell you." Xiao Hua suddenly thought of something and whispered. Xiao Mao stood in the air and listened to Xiao Hua's words. He said, "Big brother, please don't worry. I will bring the message. Be careful." After that, Xiao Mao urged his magic power and caught up with Li Zongbao who had flown far away. They found a hidden transmission array and were transmitted back to the Sky Patrol City together. Seeing the 2 figures disappear, Xiao Hua smiled and released his divine thought. After looking for a moment, he controlled the flowing cloud flying boat to fly to a place. Xiao Hua controlled the flying boat to land in a low-lying place. He kept the flying boat and set up a rabbit array. He sat cross-legged and waited quietly. Time passed quickly. Seeing that there was no movement within 100 miles, Xiao Hua waved his hand and took out a flying sword from the space. This flying sword was very strange. It was only as thick as a little finger and only 1 foot long. There were golden threads flashing on it as if it was condensed from a lot of golden threads. Is this the invisible sword? Looking at the invisible golden thread sword floating in the air, Xiaohua scanned it with his divine thought. He felt that there was a strange fluctuation in the golden thread sword that seemed to be able to block his divine thought. However, Xiaohua did not know what kind of fluctuation it was. Was it because of the runes or the material? It's a pity that Qin Jian blew himself up. Not to mention the other 3 flying swords, he didn't even leave the sword bamboo slit behind. Sigh, it's a loss. Xiaohua was speechless. It seemed that the opponents he encountered were getting more and more powerful, and they more or less had life-saving means. Even if his means were not good, he still wanted to drag Xiaohua down with him and perish together with him. Compared to the fruitful results from the previous battles, this was not worth it. This golden thread sword looks very strange. I can't use it. It's really depressing. Xiaohua thought and waved his hand. The sword light on the golden thread sword emitted a strong golden brilliance, and then it was annihilated. It was Xiaohua who killed Qin Jian's primordial spirit in the golden thread sword. If Xiaohua refined the golden thread sword, he would have to kill the sword spirit in it. Then, the golden thread sword would turn into a sword pill. When Xiaohua planted it into his primordial spirit, the golden thread sword would become Xiaohua's flying sword just like the Dream Executioner. However, Xiaohua had the Devil Realm's concealment technique, so he didn't really need to rely on the invisible sword to become invisible. Moreover, he already had 7 sword orbs in his Buddha fire that were still being nurtured. Adding another sword orb now really didn't have much meaning. He only needed to control the invisible sword and be able to kill people invisibly. He did not need to spend a lot of effort to nurture the sword. Hee, maybe one day I will meet that little girl Gu Yu and get the method to use the invisible sword from her. Xiaohua's face revealed an indescribable expression. That's right, what was the deal with Qin Jian's flying sword at the end? Xiaohua looked into the distance again, but there was no movement. He put away the golden silk sword, and his consciousness entered the mysterious dark clouds. He thought to himself, it can actually directly kill a soul. This young master's protective golden light didn't have any reaction at all. This is really too scary. If I did not meet Little White in the Yin-Yang Two Springs Mountain, my life would have been gone. Karma, karma, this is karma. Xiaohua sighed and had already entered the heaven ring. But at this moment, Huan Qi still had that kind of hazy appearance of moonlight. In the horizon, the half-moon was faint like an eyebrow, sprinkling its emerald splendor all over. A kind of faint tranquility enveloped the entire Huan Qi sky, straight to the point that it was like a quiet night somewhere in Dawn Rain continent. And in this tranquil night sky, a dragon body about 1 zhang long emitted a faint white light and danced without restraint, as if the entire sky was his. Dragon dances 9 heavens, Xiaohua's mind saw and immediately gave birth to a thought. Near the dragon body, Xiaohua's primordial spirit also danced without restraint. Above the primordial spirit, there were many soul strands. These soul strands were very strange. Some slowly elongated, some quickly danced, and even more disappeared in a flash, as if they had grown out of the primordial spirit and were immediately annihilated. Little White Dragon's soul seems to have condensed a lot. This white light was also not there before. Although it looked very faint, there is an essential difference. Xiaohua looked at it and understood. Moreover, with the Little White Dragon's soul accompanying me, this little master's primordial spirit has improved by quite a bit. Not to mention a few years, even if it's just 1 or 2 years. I should be able to break through. Of course, this twilight moon seems to have dimmed a lot. You came. Little White's voice sounded. Oh. You can sense it? Xiaohua was surprised. Little White's current situation was more similar to Little Yellow's. Yes, just now, what happened? Little White's voice was still tired. How did a soul sword pierce in? Soul sword? Xiaohua understood and said again, it was an opponent of a sword cultivator. Sword cultivator? Little White did not understand and said, this is there still something like the moon? In a while, it will be used up. There is. Xiao Hua said with a smile, how many do you want? I will give you. Chapter 2544. As he spoke, Xiao Hua took out another piece of the twilight moon and sent it into the heaven ring. Strangely enough, as soon as this full moon entered the heaven ring, it immediately merged with the previous crescent moon, illuminating the entire heaven ring. Very good. Whitey said and shook its dragon body again. That faint white light flickered along with the fluctuation. Many thanks, Whitey. Xiao Hua did not want to disturb Whitey any longer and was about to leave the sky. Thanks. Hee, Xiao Hua, you are too polite. Whitey said in a low voice, I can't wait to have more of these things. Don't. Xiao Hua's heart still had lingering fear and almost wanted to wave his hand. If there are too many of these things, my little heart will not be able to take it. Alright, you can cultivate. If this full moon is gone, try calling me, maybe I can hear you. Xiao Hua prepared to leave. I know. Whitey's dragon head shook slightly. Oh, right, there are some things in this soul sword that are hard to chew. I will leave it to you. Don't resist. As it spoke, a jade-green crystal thread flashed from Whitey's dragon head and slowly shot towards Xiao Hua's primordial spirit. Okay. Xiao Hua's primordial spirit stopped dancing and waited for the crystal thread to enter his primordial spirit. A jade-green light flashed and Xiao Hua immediately felt that many things appeared in his mind. After leaving the sky and carefully inspecting these things, Xiao Hua was almost overjoyed. It turned out that these were all Qin Jian's sword techniques. Not to mention the method to control the formless golden thread sword, even the control of the 4 divisions sword formation, how to connect the flying swords, how to speed up, how to condense the soul sword were all detailed. What made Xiao Hua the happiest was that Qin Jian actually had the primordial spirit sword technique. It was also the secret sword technique that he had been looking for. This young master understands. Xiao Hua was wild with joy when he saw so many things. After a long while, he came to his senses. This soul sword is condensed from the soul, so it must have Qin Jian's memories. This soul sword was actually swallowed by Whitey, and Qin Jian's memories were also obtained by Whitey. It's really a case of searching high and low only to find it by chance. That's right. It's probably because most of Qin Jian's soul has been devoured that Qin Jian's soul can't completely fuse with his flying sword. That's why he can't maintain his flying sword form for long. That's why he can't maintain his flying sword form after he self-destructed. That's why he reverted back to his fleshly body. Xiao Hua suddenly came to a realization. Fine. Xiao Hua sighed. If I hadn't saved the little white dragon's soul, how could I have obtained these things? The primordial spirit sword controlling technique. I'll take a look at these first. After saying that, Xiao Hua closed his eyes and calmed himself down to comprehend the secret technique he had always wanted. However, at this moment, a loud rumbling sound could be heard from the direction of Sky Patrol City. Oh. Xiao Hua was slightly taken aback. Could it be that something happened in Sky Patrol City? When Xiao Hua looked over, he saw smoke rising into the sky from the direction of Sky Patrol City. Many flying boats were flying toward him. Behind the flying boats, there were figures of cultivators from various sects flying out of Sky Patrol City. There's something going on in the conference hall again. Xiao Hua immediately thought of what Li Zongbao said and thought to himself, after this battle, regardless of victory or defeat, I'm afraid that the Sword Transformation Realm and Nascent Soul Realm cultivators will come to the vicinity of Sky Patrol City. Damn it, I've killed so many illusory swords. Will those Sword Transformation Realm cultivators come after me? And that old ghost, Jing Ran, should be coming too. Others are looking forward to the arrival of the Nascent Soul Realm cultivators, but I'm scared. Thinking that the battle had finally reached the second stage and the Nascent Soul Realm cultivators were finally coming, Xiao Hua's heart felt heavy. What will come will come. Time is like the morning sun, it can only move forward. Xiao Hua sighed. Hiding in the formation, he was not in the mood to cultivate. Looking at the many flying boats flying over his head and the disciples of various sects, he thought to himself. However, right at this moment, an extremely small thought suddenly appeared in his mind. Time is like the sun, it can only move forward. If light can be reversed, then can time be reversed? Of course, this thought only flashed in his mind. Time flow backward, what kind of magical power was that? At this moment, in Xiao Hua's mind, this was just a guess. He did not even think that such a powerful person could exist in this time. This was simply illogical. It actually took an hour for all the cultivators to fly over. The number of cultivators was so large that it really made Xiao Hua astonished. Maybe. While Xiao Hua was hesitating, a figure flew over from the direction of Sky Patrol City. He flew very slowly and his divine sense swept left and right as if he was looking for something. You're finally here. Seeing this, Xiao Hua removed the formation and flew into the air. The person who came was Bai Fengliang, whom Xiao Hua had asked Xiao Mao to look for. Fellow Taoist Xiao. Bai Fengliang saw Xiao Hua hurriedly fly over and hurriedly bowed. It's really troublesome to leave the city today. I'm late, please forgive me. It's okay. Xiao Hua had just seen the cultivators of the Dao sect leave the city. Of course, he knew that it was difficult for Bai Fengliang to come out of Sky Patrol City. He waved his hand and smiled. How's the thing I asked you to prepare? I'll let you know. Now that the Golden Core disciples of various sects have gathered in Sky Patrol City, it's quite difficult for our Holy Gate disciples to go in and out. The number of pills sent over is not very large. Bai Fengliang took out a storage bag from his waist and handed it over respectfully. He said, these are the Holy Gate disciples from various big cities. Please check. Hearing Bai Fengliang mention the difficulty, Xiao Hua knew that there were not many pills in the bag. However, when he took a look, he was shocked. There were nearly 400 Qinli pills and even dozens of Huayuan pills. Oh my, this is still not a lot. Bai Fengliang paid attention to Xiao Hua's expression. Seeing that Xiao Hua's expression was not right, he muttered in his heart. He hurriedly smiled and said, however, I've already told the other disciples that this is specially designated by the sect leader's order. They must spare no expense in terms of money and manpower, no need. Xiao Hua estimated that he had used 360 building foundation dawn to build his foundation. Even if he had condensed his core, he would not have used more than 360 building foundation dawn. There were nearly 500 dry separation dawn here, which should be enough. These dawn are already enough. You can pass down the sect leader's order that there is no need to collect these pills. Yes, I understand. Bai Fengliang let out a long breath. With Xiao Hua's words, his task was completed, and it was completed perfectly. Now that all the Golden Core cultivators have gathered in Sky Patrol City, and I just saw a lot of Dao sect disciples coming out of the city. I'm afraid that there will be a war between Huan country and Shi country. You're not safe here, so it's better for you to leave early. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and said, with the message talisman that I gave you, I'm sure you'll be rewarded handsomely. Thank you for your generous gift, Brother Xiao. Bai Fengliang bowed and thanked him. Then, he asked hesitantly, I just don't know, the previous agreement between me and Brother Xiao, you and I have an agreement? Why didn't I know about it? Xiao Hua said with a smile. Yes, I was muddle-headed. Bai Fengliang hurriedly smiled. He scanned the surroundings with his divine thought and said in a low voice, I'll leave Sky Patrol City now. However, I received news a few days ago that my Holy Gate might be making a big move. As for where it is, I don't know. That's enough. Xiao Hua waved his hand, this is your business, it has nothing to do with me. If there's nothing else, I have to go somewhere else. Brother Bai, we'll meet again if fate wills it. Yes, I'll see you off. Bai Fengliang said with a smile, the war between Dao and sword is very dangerous. I hope you take care of yourself. I look forward to the day when you're pregnant. I'll borrow fellow Taoist Bai's auspicious words. If that day ever comes, I'll definitely remember what fellow Taoist Bai has done for me. Xiao Hua laughed as he flew up into the air. He cupped his hands towards Bai Fengliang before turning around and leaving. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua did not know that he would never be able to see Bai Fengliang again, even if he was pregnant. After all, Bai Fengliang knew the relationship between Xiao Hua and Zhang Qingxiao. Xiao Hua was kind-hearted and would not be ruthless to Bai Fengliang, but why would Zhang Qingxiao care about this? He would do anything to protect his loved ones. In the past, it was Xiao Yuehong and the others. Now, it was Xiao Xianrui. Since Xiao Hua admitted that he was Shang Huaming's disciple, he would never allow any element that could threaten Xiao Hua. What's more, Xiao Hua's usefulness to him was more than the value of a junior brother. Bai Fengliang, a rogue cultivator who had bitterly pursued cultivation, finally had the opportunity to reach the foundation establishment stage and cultivate. However, because of a simple mission, all of his efforts had gone to waste and he had lost his life. He was like a wave in flowing ice valley, only surging under the sun for a moment before falling back into the river, never to be seen again. Some people have destinies, but their destinies are not in their hands. My destiny is in my own hands, not in the hands of God. Sometimes it is a self-comforting joke. Xiao Hua flew into the air. He did not know that a cultivator who had been bitterly pursuing cultivation had decided his fate just because he saw him. He only needed to identify the direction slightly before he flew towards the northwest. After all, to him, a direction was just a direction. He would only stop when it was about time to search for his destination in detail. Along the way, what he needed to do was to comprehend the primordial spirit sword controlling technique. Xiao Hua did not need to rely on the primordial spirit to control the sword, but he needed the primordial spirit sword controlling technique. He wanted to learn from this technique so that his primordial spirit could do something in the space and not just be a passerby. The primordial spirit sword controlling technique was a secret technique that could be cultivated by swordsmen. It was not easy to comprehend. Not to mention Xiao Hua, who was pondering and comprehending along the way, there was a lot of discussion in the meeting hall of Sky Patrol City. Today's shift was Heng Heng from the Utopia faction. Heng Heng's face was expressionless, but he was a little indifferent. He sat on the futon and glanced at the Gold Core cultivators. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.